It all begins with a beam of light falling and revealing a man in the center of a magic circle. This man is Kim Jin-woo, an earthling who was summoned to the world of Arsalan and ended up becoming a powerful archmage. But despite all his immense power, Jin-woo is completely exhausted. He comes across a desolate landscape and complains about the terrible erosion of ruin. Jin-woo explains that the planet Arsalan is being consumed by this mysterious erosion, which is slowly advancing and devouring every piece of land. The situation is so critical that virtually 90% of the planet's entire territory has already been completely destroyed. The only reason the few surviving kingdoms still resist is the magical barrier that Jin-woo himself developed. The big problem is that the mana stones that keep this barrier functioning are almost out of energy, with a maximum of 3 years of protection remaining. The day that defense fails, Arsalan will be doomed, and hordes of terrible monsters will devour all remaining living creatures. He laments being summoned to another world only to witness its end, while someone approaches, calling him by his pompous titles. He asks people to drop all those silly titles. After all, what's the point of so much formality when the world is falling apart? The person speaking to him was his disciple, a beautiful elf named Darius, who immediately reprimanded him, saying that facing erosion at night is far too dangerous, and as you know, whoever likes this post now gets one of these for Christmas. Jin-woo complains that she starts grumbling as soon as he arrives, but quickly asks what happened that was so important that she received an emergency call. Darius remarks that the leaders must be desperate, since he is the only one capable of freely walking through the corrupted lands. Jin-woo knows that the natives of Arsalan cannot endure those areas for long, as even their souls end up being devoured if they remain exposed for too long. The only reason he is completely immune to this devastating effect is the fact that he came from another world. Because he possesses a soul different from the local inhabitants, erosion cannot touch him, and he grows even stronger each time he destroys a source of this corruption. Even so, Jin-woo laments that one man alone cannot save the world without a giant army, while Darius agrees, saying that only a legendary hero could accomplish such a feat. Next, she asks if she should send another notice stating that he will not be attending the leaders' meeting, and the archmage agrees without hesitation. Darius tries to reassure him, telling him not to worry, because even if he ends up dying, they can simply resurrect him in a new body. She even jokes that if he dies again in the corrupted earth, his next body will be that of a cute girl, which makes Jin-woo think that wouldn't be such a bad idea, and I know you thought the same thing. Darius stares at the master with an unforgettable look and comments that his taste in these things is truly quite peculiar. She then asks him to truly rest, leaving Jin-woo alone with his own thoughts. He begins to remember his old life on Earth, where he worked like a slave, putting in overtime and surviving only on coffee, and even after coming to Arsalan, he spent decades creating magic and fighting with all his might against the terrible erosion. Upon realizing that he has never truly rested in his entire life, Jin-woo begins to feel weary of everything. Looking at the barrier that will crumble in 3 years, he knows that the tragic fate of that world is already sealed, and he confesses to himself that the only thing he truly desires now is to leave everything behind and finally rest. But suddenly, a light begins to emanate from the palm of his hand. An overwhelming energy begins to circulate around Jin-woo, leaving him confused about what is happening to his own body. A massive column of light shoots towards the sky, shattering the ground around it with a thunderous force. Enveloped by that intense glow, the archmage is completely shocked, unable to understand the origin of such energy. He feels an absolute and overwhelming force coursing through his veins, realizing that his soul has finally awakened as a transcendent being. Jin-woo finds it ironic that, after decades of unsuccessfully trying to reach this level, this supreme power has emerged just now that he has decided to give up on everything. Intrigued by his newfound ability, he reaches out to see what he is now capable of. With a simple gesture, he conjures a colossal dark portal filled with lightning and dark smoke. A system message reveals that he has unlocked the transcendental ability of the Soul Portal, which connects directly to his homeland and allows passage in spiritual form. At that moment, Jin-woo's soul detaches from his physical body. The system explains that, through this portal, he can freely manifest his powers using the strength of his own soul. Without a second thought, Jin-woo's spiritual form decides to dive headfirst into the swirling portal. The portal glows brightly as it consumes the Archmage's soul, taking him back to his true home. Upon opening his eyes, Jin-woo finds himself floating in the skies above a modern metropolis, leaving him completely shocked by the sight. He floats there in the air, observing the giant city below, unable to believe what is happening. Looking at the modern buildings, he wonders if it really has been 100 years since he left that place. Noticing the people below using cell phones very similar to those from his time, he becomes confused as to whether time has passed differently or if he has somehow traveled to the past. Determined to uncover the truth, Jin-woo quickly flies into the streets to search for his old home. Upon reaching street level, he is confronted with the noisy traffic and enormous commercial buildings of the modern city. But when he looks at the spot where his former home should be, he realizes that there is a completely different building there, and that his house has vanished. Jin-woo continues floating through the city and feels a pang in his chest as he realizes that all traces of his existence as Kim Jin-woo have been completely erased from that world. To make matters worse, he remembers that mana on Earth is very scarce, and that his soul could disappear if he stays like this for too long, meaning he urgently needs to find a soulless body to possess. Jin-woo's soul travels swiftly through the city skies, crossing the bustling streets like a trail of light. Suddenly, he stops in his tracks, sensing a very strange energy coming from nearby. He looks down and realizes that this mysterious feeling is emanating from a luxurious mansion. Determined to investigate what is happening, the Archmage decides to enter the residence. As he walks through the wall of one of the rooms, he comes across a scene that leaves him quite surprised. Lying on an improvised hospital bed, a young man is unconscious, surrounded by medical equipment that beeps incessantly. Jin-woo approaches the boy and realizes he is waging a silent battle against death. Around the bed, the young man's family members weep desperately, fearing the worst at any moment. The family doctor laments and says they did everything they could, causing the boy's grandfather to break down in tears and beg his grandson not to leave him. Observing everything closely, Jin-woo realizes that the machines are still running only because of a rather unusual energy source that keeps the body functioning. He notices that the flame of that young man's life is about to be completely extinguished and that there is no turning back. The Archmage soon discovers that the young man is Lee Jin-woo, the youngest grandson of the president of the country's largest business group and a true academic genius. He realizes that the boy is not only ill, but that his soul has already departed and that his physical body will stop breathing in a few hours. Noticing that the empty vessel was absolutely perfect for him to possess, Jin-woo smiled, knowing that his magic could easily restore that weakened health. Without wasting any time, the Archmage's spiritual form begins to channel its magical energy onto the boy's inert body. A radiant aura surrounds Lee Jin-woo as the soul from another world begins to seamlessly merge with him. A strong gust of wind and light fills the hospital room, leaving everyone present completely terrified. At that moment, the young heir slowly opens his eyes, now completely inhabited by the soul of the powerful Archmage. He sits up in bed, leaving his relatives in shock. The grandfather can hardly believe what he is seeing and is baffled as to how his grandson has suddenly come back to life. Before the boy could say anything, one of his relatives ran towards him and hugged him, crying tears of joy at the miracle. The entire room erupts in a mixture of tears and celebration, with everyone thanking the heavens for that unbelievable turnaround. They overwhelm the young man with questions about how he's feeling, while Jin-woo awkwardly complains mentally about the excessive physical affection. Later, alone in his new and luxurious room, he lies down on the enormous bed to try and put his thoughts in order. Despite finding that family extremely noisy and chaotic, he understands that the exaggerated reaction makes sense since their youngest son has just escaped death. He reflects that assuming the identity of a wealthy heir with a body in full recovery isn't a bad start at all. However, he soon remembers that, while he enjoys this comfort, the world of Arsalan continues to march at a rapid pace towards total destruction. The Archmage is trying to find a way to destroy the erosion core that keeps generating terrifying monsters. It even goes so far as to consider whether modern Earth weapons, such as tanks and armored vehicles, would be capable of containing that threat. But he quickly dismisses the idea, noting that not even nuclear bombs would solve the problem if the hidden cores weren't destroyed one by one. Unable to find a realistic way out no matter how much he thinks, Jin-woo decides to pick up a handheld video game console that was next to him. He decides to play a little to try and clear his head and take the weight of that impossible mission off his mind. Just like you, who have watched this far and still haven't subscribed. He starts playing a classic called Legend of the Dragon 7, a game he himself had approved in his past life as a developer. While controlling the character on screen, he reflects on the classic hero's journey, where he must gather allies to save the world. It is at this moment that a brilliant idea crosses his mind. If one hero wasn't enough in Arsalan, the solution would be to bring thousands of them to help. Upon seeing the option on the game screen asking if he would like to summon a second hero, Jinwoo's eyes light up with a revelation. He freezes for a moment, realizing that the answer to saving his other world was right in front of him all along. He disrupts the game, with the real possibility of summoning people from Earth to act as heroes in Arsalan. His plan is to use the power of his soul portal to connect the two worlds in a brilliant way. He intends to make Earthlings think that Arsalan is just a new, super-realistic virtual reality game. Disguising the monster invasion as events from a game, he intends to use these humans, immune to erosion, to fight and save the planet from destruction, which sounds like a certain famous anime. Jinwoo realizes he has the perfect tools for this, having combined his knowledge as a game developer, his magical abilities as an archmage, and the boundless fortune of his new family. With his spirit hovering confidently by his side, he clenches his fists, determined to make this ambitious project a success over the next 3 years. Sometime later, the family gathers around a gigantic and sophisticated dining table for a luxurious meal. The grandfather cheerfully says that he can ask for anything he wants, be it food or any kind of entertainment, and the boy politely thanks him. Then he takes advantage of the relaxed moment to announce that he has something very important he wants to start doing. One of the family members freezes on the spot and silently hopes that the young man won't obsessively return to studying. The grandfather also becomes worried and warns him, reminding him that he almost lost his life by overexerting himself in his studies in the past. But the young man displays a radiant smile and reveals that his true desire now is to start working in game development. Upon hearing that he wants to develop games, Jinwoo's family members choke on their food and are in a state of absolute shock. The grandfather asks, quite surprised, if he's talking about those modern electronic toys, leaving Jinwoo a little apprehensive about his reaction. But to everyone's surprise, the elderly man breaks into a huge proud smile and gives a thumbs up. The whole family celebrates with relief, finding it excellent that the boy has finally found a common hobby for his age. The grandfather bursts into tears of joy and immediately asks his other grandson if the family group owns a game company, discovering that they have the struggling FS Games. The old man then decides to gift Jinwoo with this company as a reward for his discharge from the hospital, leaving the young man shocked by such confidence. Jinwoo realizes that having an entire company at his disposal will greatly facilitate his plans, even if others consider it a failure. He is immensely grateful to his grandfather and promises to do his best to rebuild the business. Next, the narrative returns to the world of Arsalan, where the Archmage plans his next moves. Back on his throne in the Wizard's Tower, Jinwoo is relieved to see that the elf Tiras has kept his original body perfectly protected and intact. He explains that he placed a transfer charm on his body on Earth, which allows him to control it remotely in a fairly practical way. With everything ready and secure, the Archmage decides it's time to start drafting the story for his game to attract humans. To do this, he goes to a colossal, illuminated library, where an elf is engrossed in writing at her work table. She is so focused that she doesn't even notice the noise around her as she swiftly glides her pen across the pages of a spellbook. Jinwoo approaches stealthily and asks if she's working on a new script, causing the elf to let out a shrill scream of fright. That is the High Elf Tia, the greatest storyteller of Arsalan, who is complaining in fright to the master for having appeared out of nowhere. Jinwoo apologizes and remarks that the kingdom's most famous writer seems to remain as busy as ever. Tia explains that she is compiling her old stories into a single collection to give people a place where they can forget a little about the harsh realities of the world. Jinwoo smiles at her kindness and pulls up a chair to sit beside her. He praises Tia's attitude and asks her to imagine a story where a complete stranger suddenly falls into that world from another dimension. The Archmage explains that this person would have no obligation whatsoever to fight for Arsalan and asks how they could convince her to fight tooth and nail for the kingdom. Tia begins to analyze the situation dramatically, saying that to attract a barbarian looking for fun, they would need to create a strong sense of belonging. With an intense and focused gaze, she states that the key to this would be to use love combined with a terrible tragedy. She describes how the protagonist would fall madly in love with an ideal partner and decide to settle there. But shortly before they could consummate that love, something terrible would happen. With an almost insane expression of excitement, Tia says that the hero's beloved should die in an extremely tragic way before his eyes. Laughing maniacally, she begins to write furiously, saying that next, they would console the hero, reveal who the enemy is, and offer help for revenge. The elf continues to offer dark ideas, suggesting that the tragic death of a beloved companion or respected mentor would also awaken an unrelenting fury in the hero. Jinwoo is impressed by her dark creativity and praises her, saying that the ideas of Arsalan's greatest writer are as sharp as lightning. He reflects on how tragedy and the desire for revenge are perfect motivators to make future players act passionately on their own. Meanwhile, Tia continues laughing loudly, imagining the character's suffering, saying that simply idealizing that pain satisfies her more than any banquet. Jinwoo has to clear his throat to get the elf's attention, who immediately blushes with embarrassment and apologizes for getting too excited again. The Archmage says she doesn't need to apologize and reveals that, if the plan succeeds, hundreds of thousands of souls will read the story she creates. Tia is completely shocked when Jinwoo adds that this number could reach tens or even hundreds of millions of readers. The elf begins to tremble at the mere thought of her work reaching such a vast audience and receiving praise and applause from millions of people around the world. Driven by blind determination, she advances upon the Archmage, vowing to do anything to make it happen, even if it means becoming a slave or corrupting her own soul. Jinwoo refocuses and tells her to initially think of it as a smaller-scale test, where about 3,000 humans would be summoned to the Ryzen region. He explains that they need to give these people real reasons to dedicate themselves and fight with determination, leaving Tia fascinated by that concept worthy of a fantasy novel. Jinwoo confirms her suspicions and suggests that they use the village of Evert, a region devastated by erosion, as the starting point and tutorial for these new warriors. Tia shivers with emotion as she thinks about the dramatic possibilities of that ruined village, while Jinwoo decides to let her savor that moment of inspiration. The Archmage knows that since Arsalan is already a real world, all he needs to do is apply a narrative layer over reality to have the foundation of his game ready and present it to FS Games. However, he acknowledges that a good story alone won't be enough to convince the company's board, who will likely think he's gone mad. To impress them, he plans to present a concept for an immersive and free virtual world that utilizes technology far beyond what current science is capable of creating. Since his Soul Gate is still exclusively for his use, Jinwoo decides to first create a realistic demonstration video to introduce the game's story and characters. With that in mind, he decides it's time to recruit some local actors for the demo recording. He uses his magic to communicate mentally with one of his subordinates named Hasman, who promptly answers his master's call. Jinwoo orders him to go to Reinjord Castle, accompanied by Arlun and Haina for a crucial mission concerning the future of Arsalan. Next, the scene moves to the beautiful and imposing towers of Reinjord Castle under the clear sky. The Archmage appears in the castle courtyard through a teleportation portal charged with bluish magical energy. There, he is greeted by his 3 most loyal servants, who bow deeply in respect upon the arrival of their leader. One of them, the expressive and dedicated Hasman, shouts at the top of his lungs that he did his absolute best to look after the entire territory in his master's absence. The oldest priest in the court also begins to weep with pure emotion and fanaticism, imploring that the blessing of the goddess of light be with his lord. Jinwoo thanks everyone for their dedication, but confesses that he is a little frightened by that exaggerated devotion and begs the old man to lower that sacred symbol. The captain of the knights, Haina, steps forward with a confident smile and declares that she is more than ready to give her life for the kingdom of Arsalan. The Archmage analyzes the 3 and thinks that Haina is perfect for the lead role because she is very beautiful, but that Hasman has too much of a caricatured face to play the good guy in the story. With a mischievous grin on his face, Jinwoo realizes that the only solution will be to make some drastic changes to their appearance. He asks Hasman if he understands anything about black magic, and the servant humbly replies that his knowledge is insignificant compared to that of his master. Without giving any explanation, the Archmage pulls out some mystical robes and orders the 2 to put them on immediately to begin the characterization. Upon donning the robes, Hasman transforms into a fearsome necromancer skeleton lord, while the priest takes on the grim appearance of a dark bishop. The priest is distraught at having been transformed into an evil cleric and tearfully begs for forgiveness, while Jinwoo thinks the frightening costume is a perfect fit. Next, the Archmage turns to assess the appearance of the beautiful Captain Haina. Seeing the knight wearing that heavy drab metal armor, he senses that it won't work very well to attract the attention of future players. He then reveals a much lighter and more revealing outfit, typical of RPG heroines, leaving Hina completely blushing and incredulous at the costume. The Archmage earnestly insists that she wear that special garment, ignoring the warrior's embarrassed complaints. Approaching with a penetrating bright gaze, he dramatically whispers that she needs to make this sacrifice for the good of all Arsalan. Hina eventually gives in and, after a few minutes, walks back with rather hesitant steps, while the metal of her boots clinks on the ground. Upon seeing her wearing that extremely short and provocative armor, Jinwoo is completely speechless at his captain's stunning beauty. He tries to disguise his reaction by praising the impeccable appearance, while Hina, shyly, questions whether that can really be considered real battle armor. With all his smooth talk, Jinwoo explains that a female warrior's defense is directly proportional to the amount of exposed skin, claiming that this is one of the magical laws of his world. With the three actors characterized as villains and heroine, the Archmage analyzes the group and feels that the scene still needs some more dramatic element to be perfect. He thinks it would be incredible to have Hina protecting a frail and delicate saint amidst the flames of battle, and considers recruiting the elderly Saint Tabisa for the role. However, remembering that the elderly woman is over 200 years old and has a grumpy appearance, Jinwoo dismisses the idea because she doesn't fit the profile of a frail saint he needs. Suddenly, a cheerful child's voice echoes through the castle courtyard, drawing the Archmage's attention. Two children run past, playing tag, while a young woman with demon wings tries to stop them from making noise near the Lord. Upon noticing Jinwoo's imposing presence, the children stop in fright, and the young demon approaches in a panic to apologize. That is the succubus Eri, who bends over trembling and exhausted, begging forgiveness for the unruly behavior of the children who invaded the castle. Looking at the succubus's youthful and delicate features, a sly smile begins to appear on Jinwoo's face. He points to the frightened succubus and comically announces that she has just been cast to play the pure and innocent saint in the game. Eri falls into utter despair, arguing that a creature of her seductive race could never pass for an immaculate saint, but the Archmage believes that this contrast will make the role even more perfect. With the main cast finally reunited, Jinwoo clasps his hands together with a satisfied smile on his face. He asks if everyone is ready to give it their all and start filming the first dramatic scenes of that fake game. Sometime later, in the great main hall of the tower, the disciples begin reciting Jinwoo's legendary titles, at which point he sighs and asks them to skip all that formality. His principal elven assistant kneels before the throne and reports that, as per his orders, all 130 disciples from the tower are already gathered there. However, when she raised her eyes towards the throne, the elf couldn't hide an expression of extreme bewilderment. She questions why the generals are wearing those theatrical and bizarre outfits, and Jinwoo cheerfully explains that they are simply rehearsing a skit. The Archmage raises a gleaming mana gem and declares that this game will be the kingdom's salvation, leaving the elf even more confused by the madness. He calls for the attention of all the magicians present and makes the important announcement that he has recently achieved spiritual transcendence. The disciples erupt in celebrations and applause upon hearing that their master now has the power to open the legendary Portal of Souls to connect to another world. Jinwoo explains that he will use this ability to summon valiant warriors from Earth who will fight alongside them as heroes against erosion. He floats the magic crystal and announces that the disciples' mission from now on will be to provide all the support so that these new heroes can grow stronger and fight for Arsalan. The Archmage hands the shining crystal to one of the mages and explains that it contains the video demonstration they created to showcase the game's universe. He instructs the wizards to edit the video using magic, asking them to add more grandeur, divine effects, and armies of skeletons in the background to make the battles more dramatic. Jinwoo also demands that they add sound effects and a soundtrack to the recording, leaving the mage in charge of the crystal quite sweaty and confused by the technical requirements. He warns his disciples not to use the excuse that magicians don't know how to do manual labor, which leaves the group completely traumatized. Despite demanding a lot from them, the Archmage knows they will find a way to deliver a good result, since a mage's specialty is turning the impossible into reality. Observing the blue robes and pointed hoods of the frightened disciples, Jinwoo couldn't help but think that their appearance resembled something. He realizes that those clothes, combined with the hoods, make them look identical to the cute blue cat plush toys he has in his room on Earth. Giving free rein to his developer imagination, the Archmage points to the costumed wizards and announces that, from that moment on, They will be called magic dragons. He jokingly says that signing a contract with them is a pact for eternal life and asks his new magic dragons to grant his gaming wishes, eliciting comical murmurs from the disciples. Immediately afterwards, the scene abruptly changes to the bustling city center of Seoul under a sunny sky. Lee Jin-woo re-emerges in the modern world, wearing an elegant black suit and carrying a briefcase with an expression of pure confidence and determination. Thanks to the tireless help of his magical servants in Arsalan, the game demo video was completed in record time. Back in the real world, Jin-woo is walking with his briefcase when he is approached by a man in a suit, who asks if he is the young president of the company. The man enthusiastically introduces himself as Secretary Kim Han-soo, saying it is a great honor to meet him. He greets Jin-woo with a firm handshake and explains that he was sent by the group's president himself to provide the young man with all the necessary support. As they walk towards the building, the secretary informs them that, as requested, he has already gathered the company's most talented and capable employees for the meeting. Inside the meeting room, An Yong-seon, the head of development at the struggling FS Games, waits anxiously, his face fixed on his phone with a worried expression. The developer reads the latest news about how heir Lee Jin-woo has taken control and plans to shut down the failing company for good. He becomes thoughtful when he remembers that the new president is just a young man in his early 20s, surrounded by great expectations. An Yong-seon knows very well that despite his young age, the boy is already a renowned genius and possesses one of the brightest minds in the technology market. Suddenly, the meeting room door is flung open by Secretary Han-soo, announcing the president's arrival. Jin-woo enters the room with firm steps, displaying impeccable posture and a perfectly tailored suit. His mere presence causes all the employees present to fall silent immediately, impressed by the young man's imposing posture. The experienced head of development swallows hard when he realizes that the aura of confidence emanating from the young heir is completely out of the ordinary. Jin-woo sits at the head of the table and dispenses with formal introductions, knowing that everyone there already knows exactly who he is. With a mysterious smile, he declares that they should begin the meeting immediately without wasting time with detours. The young man throws the company's disastrous reports on the table, pointing out that their latest game was cancelled last month and that all recent projects have failed before even being released. Upon hearing Jin-woo mention that even the core development team was transferred to another competing company, An Yong-seon lowers his head in shame and takes full responsibility for the failure. The developer falls into silent despair, fearing being fired right there and then because of those terrible results. But Jin-woo surprises everyone by closing the folder and saying that closing a failing company to start one from scratch is exactly the best solution they could take. He then asks the secretary to distribute some folders to the team, explaining that there is something revolutionary he wants to show everyone. An Yong-seon takes the document and reads the project's mysterious title, called Project Arsalan. Jin-woo explains that this is a bold proposal for a full virtual reality game, and asks them to read the synopsis and give their most honest opinions about the story. The staff review the papers with amazement, commenting that the setting is incredibly solid and that the story has a classic yet modern style. However, the head of development expresses concern that virtual reality games are not yet popular in the market and that the public may react negatively to this technology. Jin-woo gives a bright smile and assures people that they will become completely obsessed and addicted to the experience as soon as they know it. He abruptly rises from his chair and slams his hands on the table, stating with absolute conviction that he is not exaggerating. The young man solemnly declares that, with the virtual reality game he developed himself, he will turn the entertainment industry upside down. Noticing the doubt in their eyes, Jin-woo asks if the building has a room large enough to test something and orders everyone to follow him there. All the employees gather in the gigantic motion capture room, whispering anxiously and confusedly about the test. Some even doubt the promise of complete virtual reality, questioning whether the young heir of Oseong is trying to deceive them for some silly reason. An Yong-seon announces that the entire team is already assembled, and Jin-woo calmly asks for all the lights in the room to be turned off. With the room in complete darkness, the boy crouches in the center of the hall and asks everyone to take a few steps back. He then places the black magic cube on the floor and announces the start of the project demonstration. The cube opens spectacularly, firing extremely bright beams of blue light that illuminate the entire room. Giant magical circles and runes begin to expand across the floor, startling the employees with such a realistic projection. In the blink of an eye, the gray floor of the room disappears completely, giving way to a vast and brilliant field of lush green grass. An Yong-seon is completely perplexed as he feels the wind and sees the grass beneath his feet, unable to understand how this is possible. As the shimmering mist dissipates, the developer looks up at the sky and his mouth drops open in utter shock at what he sees. The entire team suddenly finds themselves in the middle of an endless, breathtaking plain, shouting in surprise at the seamless transition. Suddenly, a colossal red dragon bursts forth, tearing through the sky and unleashing a deafening roar in their direction. The employees panic completely and start running for their lives, while Jinwoo is amused by their reaction and assures them that it's just a hologram. An Yong-seon, still trembling, asks in fear if it's really just a projection, and the young man confirms that this is the true virtual reality. Jinwoo proudly opens his arms and officially introduces the magnificent world of Arsalan to his new team. Looking around, the developers see flying dragons, floating islands, and majestic castles that make up the project's setting. An Yong-seon points at the landscape in disbelief, asking if this is really the game world he designed, and the young man confirms with a satisfied smile. The development manager is amazed by the sheer level of technology, while Jinwoo snaps his fingers and suggests they move on to the game's main story. Suddenly, the sunny sky darkens abruptly, and the ground beneath the employees' feet begins to shake violently. A terrifying solar eclipse takes over the red sky, bathing the entire field in a dark crimson light. To everyone's dismay, gigantic skeletal hands begin to sprout from the cracked earth, shattering the peaceful scene. Emerging from the darkness of the eclipse, the Necromancer Lord and the Bishop of Darkness begin to laugh loudly and malevolently, ordering their skeletal servants to attack without mercy. The army of the undead advances in a terrifying fashion, while the Dark Cleric proclaims that the power of darkness will corrupt all. The fearsome necromancer skeleton extends his bony hand and orders his servants to advance and steal the hearts of the weak. The employees begin running around desperately, unsure if it's real or just a simulation, and panic completely when Jinwoo mysteriously hints that it might very well be real. In the midst of the confusion, the courageous development manager, An Yong-seon, rushes to stand in front of his young boss and orders everyone to retreat. At that crucial moment, Captain Hina leaps heroically through the air, her gleaming sword in hand. With a single, swift, and devastating slash, she destroys several skeletons at once, leaving all the employees speechless with her strength. The succubus, disguised as a saint, extends her illuminated hands and sweetly asks everyone to remain calm and keep the faith. She unleashes a colossal burst of golden light that sweeps across the battlefield, illuminating the entire scene with a sacred glow. The false saint floats enveloped in a divine halo, promising that the light will protect them from all evil while Hina stands guard beside her. The employees go wild and begin to vibrate with emotion, shouting that they were saved by the saint's blessing and the brave warrior of light. Seeing the tears of emotion on the employees' faces, Jinwoo gives a discreet smile, realizing that his team is already completely immersed in the simulation. The Archmage lets out a slight smile, satisfied that everything is going exactly as he had planned. Observing his team's euphoric reaction to the dark skies of Arsalan, he knows his strategy was flawless. With a focused and intent gaze, he decides that it's the perfect moment to present the climax of that grand demonstration. The Skeleton Lord raises his bony staff and laughs grimly, saying that he has excellent guinea pigs before him for his experiments. He orders his horde of monsters to devour human flesh, causing the skeletons to advance with a terrifying roar. Hina calls upon the saint for help as she prepares to contain the terrible onslaught of the creatures of darkness. The beautiful saint raises her hands to the sky and implores humans to share with her the light that is in their hearts. Completely immersed in the fantasy, An Yong-seon and the other employees raise their arms full of energy, urging them to join forces and help the heroines. This collective energy is channeled directly into Hina's sword, which begins to sparkle with super-powerful golden lightning. The warrior advances at high speed against the enemy army with a furious war cry. She leaps toward the necromancer, invoking Arsalan's name with all her determination. The entire office staff raises their fists and shouts along with the warrior, clamoring for the kingdom as if they were true heroes. With a devastating strike of her electricity-charged sword, Hina unleashes a wave of fire that reduces the horde of undead to ashes and strikes the enemy boss. The Skeleton Lord is thrown backward by the overwhelming impact, unable to believe he has been defeated in such a humiliating way. A gigantic explosion of sacred energy consumes the villain, completely destroying his skeletal body. He lets out a final cry of agony as he is defeated by the impressive strength of that warrior. Lying on the ground and about to disappear, the necromancer pleads for help from his supreme master, the fearsome lord of corruption who floats in the dark portal. But the ruthless hooded villain merely mocks his lackey's failure, coldly stating that weak trash is of no use to him. With a simple snap of his fingers, he evaporates his own ally with his purple magic amidst the skeleton's desperate screams. The employees watch the scene in horror, unable to believe that the terrible villainous leader had eliminated his own ally without hesitation. The Lord of Corruption then points his index finger at the humans and warns in a chilling way that they will be next. He unleashes an overwhelming burst of purple flames that causes all the employees to panic completely and start screaming for help. But, suddenly, a crack echoes through the air and the lights in the motion capture room come on, revealing the developers huddled and screaming on the cold floor. An Yong-seon slowly opens his eyes and realizes, with extreme confusion, that the apocalyptic scenery and the monsters have completely disappeared. The employees begin to awkwardly get up from the floor, looking around in utter bewilderment as they realize they are still inside the company building. Jin Woo, who had been standing calmly next to the light switch, calmly addresses the team. Displaying a serene smile, he asks mockingly if they liked the demonstration video of the project he prepared. The employees excitedly rush towards their boss, bombarding him with questions about the incredible projection and begging to see the saint again. The development manager awkwardly adjusts his glasses and apologizes for his overreaction, confessing that it was his first real experience with virtual reality. However, he expresses concern about revealing something so revolutionary to the public, warning that the commercial value of that unprecedented technology is beyond anyone's imagination. Jinwoo smiles confidently and says that no one would have believed in that technology if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, encouraging An Yong-seon to spread the rumor about the project. He then asks if the team agrees to accompany him on this journey, and the employees respond with euphoric shouts that they would follow him to the depths of hell. Satisfied with the answer, the young man tells them to forget everything they knew about traditional programming and warns them that they will start from scratch using his revolutionary artificial intelligence. He states with conviction that their goal is not just to dominate the gaming market, but to change the world's culture itself through that project. Jinwoo raises his clenched fist and urges everyone to make history together, met with enthusiastic shouts from his entire team. Sometime later, the shocking news that FS Games is developing a game capable of changing the world begins to go viral on social media and internet forums. Several news outlets are beginning to publish sensational headlines focusing on the mysterious full virtual reality project announced by the company. The most enthusiastic netizens are beginning to heap exaggerated praise on the young heir Lee Jin-woo, claiming that this revolutionary project will be far greater than any other recent technology. However, many skeptical and ironic comments are also beginning to appear on the forum, with users claiming that it's all just a bad joke and that the failing FS Games went bankrupt a long time ago. In his private laboratory, Jin-woo monitors the online buzz and realizes that, as expected, nobody believes the rumors about the new game. Suddenly, the silence of the laboratory is broken by the vibration of his cell phone, indicating that his grandfather is calling. The young man answers the call calmly, and the older man asks if he has seen the malicious news and gossip circulating about him online. The grandfather becomes extremely irritated by the negative comments about his grandson and offers to have the family's legal team sue everyone. But Jin-woo just laughs and says that all publicity is welcome. The elderly man accepts the decision and, while reading the news on his own computer, asks how the preparations for the company's new business are going. Jin-woo reports that everything is going very well and proudly reveals that they have just finished the first prototype of the game console. Upon hanging up the phone, the young archmage remembers that he has already successfully implemented the magic fishing system into the game's code. Knowing that his grandfather had always been passionate about fishing, the young man had asked if he still enjoyed the sport, prompting the old man to boast about his past adventures at sea. Jin-woo then invites him to go fishing together, but the grandfather politely declines, explaining that his back pain has been terrible lately and that he prefers to stay home and rest. With a mysterious smile, the young man decides that this is the perfect opportunity and announces that he is going to his grandfather's house to show him a surprise. The scene cuts to nightfall, showing the family's luxurious mansion under the dark sky. Back in the bedroom, the grandfather examines the modern virtual reality headset with curiosity, wondering if it's really the device his grandson developed. Jinwoo helps the elderly man lie down comfortably in the armchair and places the visor on his head, promising him an unforgettable surprise. Even though he only agreed to the test to please his grandson, the grandfather is impressed to notice that the design and comfort of the device are superior to those of the major competitors on the market. The young man holds the activation control and asks if he is ready, receiving a confident response from the elderly man to begin the test. Jinwoo presses the start button and wishes his grandfather an excellent trip through the lands of Arsalan. The screen glows intensely with a burst of magical bluish energy, initiating the process of total immersion of the elderly person's mind. Upon opening his eyes within the virtual environment, the grandfather blinks, confused by the digital particles floating around him. He looks at his own hands and realizes he is in the middle of an incredibly vivid and realistic forest under the sunlight. The old man gets up and walks through the majestic trees, completely dazzled by the perfect details of that virtual nature. That's when Jinwoo appears right behind him, officially welcoming him to the wonderful world of Arsalan. The grandfather turns around, startled, and asks, perplexed, where they are, and the boy explains that they are inside the simulator he created. Jinwoo holds out a magic mirror and reveals that he modeled his grandfather's avatar with the youthful and vigorous appearance he had in his 40s. The elderly man clutches his grandson's shoulders in utter shock as he sees his rejuvenated reflection, realizing that the promise of immersive virtual reality was completely true. He touches his own face, radiant with joy, and realizes that all his old physical pains have vanished and that he feels full of energy again. Completely amazed, the grandfather comments that the technology is on a divine level and asks when his grandson had time to create something so magnificent. Jinwoo uses the perfect excuse that his mind remained active during the time he was in a coma, claiming that he used this period of isolation to mentally design all the technology. The boy then takes his grandfather's hand and pulls him excitedly, leaving the old man curious about their next destination on their journey. With a knowing smile, Jinwoo reveals that their first commitment in that magical land will be a fun fishing trip. They arrive at the shore of a crystal-clear lake surrounded by mountains, causing the old man to sigh in admiration at the beauty of the landscape. With a simple magical gesture, the archmage conjures a comfortable armchair and a fishing rod directly from his inventory. The grandfather praises the practicality of the magic, and the grandson promises that soon the system will be so simple that the old man himself will be able to summon the items on his own. Holding the fishing rod, the old man smiles nostalgically, realizing that the weight and grip of the equipment are identical to those he used in his youth. He adopts a firm stance and asks his grandson to pay attention to how a true master executes a throw. The elderly man casts the line with mastery, making the bait fall into the center of the lake with a perfect splash of water. Almost instantly, the rod bends sharply, and the water begins to churn violently, indicating that a huge fish has taken the bait. The grandfather begins a fierce battle against the aquatic creature, impressed by the brutal strength he feels through the equipment. But, befitting his rejuvenated body, the muscles in his arm contract, full of veins and full of strength. Shouting that his determination is much greater, he pulls the line with all his might and makes a giant sea monster leap out of the water. A colossal and incredibly heavy blue fish flies high through the skies before the astonished eyes of the old man. The creature falls heavily onto the rocky bank, splashing water and proving the absurd scale of that catch. Still panting, the grandfather stares at the giant fish, perplexed by the realism of the game's physics, while Jinwoo cheers excitedly and praises his grandfather's feat. The old man looks at his hands, damp and trembling from the effort, feeling a sense of vitality he had long forgotten. He reflects that he had already resigned himself to old age and the relentless advance of time in his real life. But with a smile of pure happiness and eyes shining with emotion, he celebrates feeling truly alive again after so many decades of physical limitations. The old man lets out a thunderous laugh that echoes through the valley, while his grandson watches, pleased to see the genuine joy on his face. Jinwoo smiles, knowing that his plan to bring humans to protect Arsalan will begin much more smoothly now that he has his grandfather's support. The young man suggests they take a special photo using the game's capture mode to celebrate that historic fishing trip, and the old man enthusiastically agrees to the idea. The grandfather climbs atop the giant fish and strikes a triumphant bodybuilder pose, laughing loudly and celebrating all that renewed energy. As night falls, the two settle comfortably around a warm campfire in the forest, grilling generous portions of fresh fish while enjoying that moment of peace and togetherness as a family. The grandfather devours the grilled fish with great relish, marveling at the realization that he can taste and even satisfy his hunger with virtual food. While the old man eats happily, Jinwoo spots two local guards emerging from behind the bushes and realizes he's never seen them in that area before. The grandfather asks in surprise if another person just entered the game, but the Archmage quickly explains that the two newcomers are merely virtual characters native to that world. The guards find the pair's words very strange and decide they must report that suspicious presence to the lord of the castle. However, before they can take a step, the fearsome Hasmon appears behind them, unleashing a terrifying energy that makes them tremble with fear. The skeleton lord orders them in a menacing voice to get out of there immediately so as not to disrupt his master's special presentation. The guards flee in panic, leading the grandfather to question whether this sudden action was a programming error in the game, which Jinwoo comically confirms to cover up. The elderly man admits he doesn't yet fully understand technology, but he's impressed by the scale of the project and promises to provide all the necessary financial support so his grandson can focus on developing the game. Jinwoo is very pleased to have secured sponsorship from the president of the country's largest business group, knowing that this will drastically accelerate the project's progress. The grandfather then points to the screen on his face and asks if he should take the access console with him back to the real world. Jinwoo explains that he needs to recall the prototype due to safety and patent issues, but the elderly man complains, saying he doesn't want to go back to lying at home waiting for time to pass. The young Archmage asks his grandfather to be patient and promises that he will be the first to receive the ultimate device as soon as mass production begins, making the old man very happy. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the imposing building of the group's company at dusk under an orange sky. Inside, the developers at FS Games are working hard, refining the tools and building the virtual reality game structure on top of the magical graphics engine created by Jinwoo. Based on the brilliant script written by the elf Tia, the art team creates the character designs and defines the realistic routine of each one within the world of Arsalan. The female employees at the company are completely obsessed with the looks of team leader Leon, the impeccably blonde knight from the game. The female employees sigh with longing in front of the computer screen, commenting that the warrior is too beautiful and that they can hardly wait to see him move for real. An Yong-seon approaches and comments that all employees will have the chance to interact with the game's heroes as soon as the world of Arsalan is activated. The girls complain angrily, knowing that, so far, only the directors and team leaders have been allowed to test the immersive simulator. They mention that the head of development has been spending every night working without going home, but he just laughs awkwardly and says he's just doing his job. Suddenly, the elevator doors on that floor open smoothly, drawing the attention of the entire development team. Jinwoo enters the office casually with his secretary and is greeted enthusiastically by all the department's employees. The young president announces that the stability tests of the virtual reality console have been completed with absolute success, leaving An Yong-seon extremely euphoric as he realizes that mass production will finally begin. Jinwoo asks the head of development to take the lead and present the details of the grand launch strategy to the team. The developer takes the floor and reminds everyone about Universe, the gigantic technology event promoted by the parent company of the Oseong Group. He excitingly reveals that FS Games will officially participate in the event, eliciting cheers of celebration from the entire development room. An Yong-seon clenches his fist emotionally, recalling all the pressure, humiliation, and unfair criticism that the company and the young president have suffered so far due to the business's downturn. He loudly proclaims that the hour of victory has arrived and that their new project will conquer and revolutionize the global gaming market once and for all. Jinwoo compliments the announcement by saying that, after the presentation, each employee will receive the best virtual reality console to participate in the largest internal test ever conducted. The employees celebrate hysterically, raising their arms and chanting Lee Jinwoo's name in unison as a gesture of gratitude. The young man smiles, pleased with the team's enthusiasm, but soon feels his cell phone vibrating insistently in his pocket. Checking the screen, he sees a flood of urgent messages from his grandfather impatiently demanding that the game server be opened soon so he can go fishing. The old man sends a funny sticker letting his grandson know he's already on his way to the FS Games building, leaving him completely startled by the unexpected rush. With no other option, Jinwoo dismisses all the employees early so they can go to rest. surprising the development manager who was already prepared to work another hour of overtime. Sometime later, the scenes show the bustling convention center area of the city under the sunlight. In the main pavilion, a gigantic crowd of journalists, gaming fans, and curious onlookers gathers for the official opening of Universe. Some reporters are skeptical about FS Games, predicting that the company will fail completely if it presents just another ordinary console under the false promise of virtual reality. They comment that although the announcement has brought attention to the Oseong Group, this presentation could be the company's worst mistake if the game isn't truly revolutionary. Experts point out that the virtual reality market is a failure due to problems with weight, battery life, and applications, and believe that Oseong's promise is pure science fiction. Even so, everyone admits that if the device is even minimally innovative, it will still make a big impact, while the announcer's voice heralds the start of the launch event. The presenter takes the stage to applause and announces that, before discussing the group's new business ventures, they have a very special guest to introduce. He enthusiastically announces the president of FS Games, Lee Jin-woo, who walks under the spotlights, adjusting his tie elegantly and very confidently. The crowd whispers in awe as they see the young heir of the Oseong family miraculously return from the dead, while he takes the microphone and warmly greets the audience. The young man jokes about the funny rumors circulating on the internet lately regarding his genius, such as the one about him having invented an anti-gravity device and traveled to the moon. With a firm and focused gaze, he states that what he will present today isn't quite on that scale of fiction, but that it will certainly exceed all the expectations of that audience. With a sly smile, Jin-woo asks everyone to pay close attention and extends his arm to begin the show. With a simple gesture from the boy, a gigantic wave of crystal-clear, ultra-realistic water invades the stage and surges towards the audience, leaving everyone in absolute shock. The crowd screams in terror as they find themselves submerged in the middle of the ocean, wondering in horror if it's some kind of highly advanced four-dimensional special effect. Jin-woo's voice echoes powerfully through the hall, narrating that humanity has finally conquered the sea and that, despite all the tragedy and pain of history, human footsteps have reached the sandy beach. The ocean landscape transforms into a scorching desert traversed by a lone rider, while the narrator's voice describes the man's journey through the savannas and eternal glaciers of the world. Facing the vast white expanse, Jin-woo continues his poetic speech, saying that with unwavering courage in the face of death and stubborn perseverance, humanity has conquered even the highest and most dangerous mountains. The spectators reach out in amazement as they feel the real cold and texture of the falling snowflakes, unable to comprehend how that three-dimensional projection can be so perfect. Next, the projection quickly shifts to the vastness of outer space, with the boy explaining that human ambition didn't stop on Earth and soon set out to conquer the skies and send probes to Mars. Floating majestically in the stellar scenery, he comments on the real physical limitations that make deep space exploration a virtually impossible mission today. The young president provocatively questions whether humans are doomed to die without ever experiencing the true fantasy of exploring the unknown. With a triumphant snap of his fingers, Jin-woo announces that he hasn't given up on his dream and has created the perfect fantasy universe everyone has always dreamed of. A sudden burst of colossal purple lightning strikes the stage amidst gasps of astonishment from the audience watching the performance. The blue sky of space gives way to a somber atmosphere, revealing a gigantic blood moon shining between red clouds. In the blink of an eye, the entire audience finds itself standing on a desolate, rocky ground under the ominous light of that Arsalan eclipse. One of their photographers is left breathless when a small, adorable winged creature floats right in front of his camera, leaving him unsure of its exact location. Hundreds of these cute little monsters begin to fly over the confused audience, who run and scream in amazement at such sensory perfection. Jin-woo steps forward with the microphone and, with a welcoming smile, prepares to make the final revelation of the night. Behind him, gigantic projections of the skeleton dragon and the warriors of Arsalan appear, as he officially presents the fully immersive virtual reality game called Arsalan Saga. Raising the modern, bright display, he announces that early access will begin in 2 weeks, and that sales of the first 2,500 limited units of the device begin today. The Oseong Group's sales page is immediately activated online, offering the revolutionary immersive visor for over 3 million won. Large advertisements flood the internet, highlighting the new device providing exclusive access to the lands of Arsalan Saga. As expected, internet forums are flooded with dubious comments accusing the company of promoting a blatant scam to inflate its stock price. In his room, a digital influencer analyzes the negative reaction, but is shocked to see that, despite the criticism, all the consoles sold out in minutes. He leans back in his chair, lost in thought, and having managed to secure his device, plans to test the technology in 2 weeks to decide whether to make a video praising it or file a lawsuit. His roommate questions what they will do if that absurd technological promise is actually true. The young man adjusts his hat with a wry smile and declares that, if it's true, he'll abandon the tech channel to become the first content creator focused on Arsalan. 2 weeks pass quickly, and the scene returns to the lush, sunny lands of the kingdom of Arsalan. Jin Woo, wearing his classic mystical archmage robe, displays a smile of pure satisfaction. He looks at the blue sky and whispers that the first heroes from Earth are about to make their grand debut in that world. In the village of Evert, one of the local wizards rehearses his merchant lines, trying to play the role as naturally and welcomingly as possible. However, the theater director Tia suddenly appears, dramatically shouting to stop the rehearsal immediately. The elf complains that his performance as a tavern keeper is too stiff and demands that he eat 6 times a day starting today to gain the prominent belly necessary for the character. Next, she turns to the local blacksmith, asking if he has memorized all his lines to welcome the new players, and orders the action to begin. The burly blacksmith raises a sparkling hammer and acts comically, saying that his hand slipped and broke the sword in half, drawing praise from the enthusiastic director. Some disciples of the tower question whether the chances of failure really need to be so high, and Tia explains, laughing, that frustration is part of the addictive experience that players seek. Jin Woo approaches and praises the elf's excellent directing work, who immediately turns around, radiant with joy upon seeing her master. The archmage asks if the preparations in the tower are in order, and the elf Tyrus reports that they can already generate up to 10,000 avatar bodies at once for the new players. Jin Woo thoughtfully analyzes the reports, knowing that the magical mana stones remain the main technological bottleneck they need to resolve for the project's success. Despite needing more manpower, he knows there's no need to rush and that they can gradually reclaim the territory, focusing first on the game's profits. Observing the village teeming with life in comparison to the despair of the past, he takes pride in seeing the positive result of having invested his resources in creating that infrastructure. Tyrus brings up a new production problem, pointing out that they still haven't found a suitable knight to play the hero Leon. Jinwoo suggests choosing any skilled warrior, but Tia hysterically intervenes, saying that the protagonist of the story absolutely must be an incredibly charming and handsome young man. The young man needs to agree with her, acknowledging that most of her royal knights are rustic battle warriors and that none of them come close to the required beauty. They know that the audience needs to fall in love with the character and wholeheartedly commit to that cause, fighting fervently for the fate of the kingdom of Arsalan. Thinking of a clever way out of the dilemma, the little archmage quickly smiles slyly as he finds the perfect solution for the role. He calls for his assistant Tyrus, who approaches with elegant and firm steps through the castle's stone courtyard. With a comical and slightly frightening expression, the elf directly suggests creating the hero's perfect body and having Jinwoo possess it himself for the role, leaving the master suspicious of her true intentions. Even though he finds the idea bold, he admits that creating the structure of Leon's avatar first and then adjusting the technical details isn't a bad plan. To Jinwoo's utter astonishment, Tyrus reveals with a mischievous smile that the body design is now completely finished and invites him to see it. Upon opening the doors to a large, brightly lit hall, Tia and the others are amazed to find themselves face to face with a row of remarkably realistic wax figures and statues. Jinwoo walks around the place, confessing that the sheer number of mannequins identical to real people makes him a little uncomfortable, while Tia jumps for joy. The elven writer runs to hug a smaller, very cute doll, and Tyrus explains, laughing, that she created that child version of the master especially to fit in her arms. Auntie pinches the doll's chubby cheeks, enchanted by the masterpiece, while Jinwoo sternly warns her not to try and climb on top of the clone. The writer pouts, complaining that she only wanted to give the little master some affection, but he retorts that her excessive affection would surely end up suffocating the puppet to death. Tyrus interrupts the game and, with a polite gesture, points to a large chair covered by a red cloth where the body of the hero Leon is hidden. Tyrus asks Jinwoo and Tia to prepare themselves psychologically, as the appearance of the new doll is truly shocking. She prepares to pull back the red sheet with a proud smile, saying that she has finally managed to complete her greatest creation. Upon removing the cover, she enthusiastically reveals an absolute masterpiece that, according to her, does not belong to that world. Jinwoo and Tia are completely speechless and dumbfounded when they see the creature's glow. An immense and majestic golden light fills the entire hall, revealing the perfect form of the knight Leon. Aunt's eyes widened in utter shock, unable to tear her gaze away from that physical perfection. The elven writer celebrates hysterically, saying that he turned out even more handsome than she had imagined, while Tyrus proudly explains that she used dragon bones and ether fibers to build his musculature. Tyrus explains that the armor was forged by 12 dwarf master blacksmiths using the legendary scales of Helby. Jinwoo swallowed hard upon hearing the name of the terrifying monster and wondered, horrified, how she managed to convince Helby to hand over her scales so easily. Back on his throne, the Archmage decides to test his new creation to see if all that physical strength really works. He initiates the possession spell, and a colossal discharge of blue energy connects Jinwoo's spirit directly to the body of the warrior Leon. The two elves watch the process, marveling at the intensity of the magical lightning that envelops the thrones. Leon's body finally comes to life under the Archmage's control, his bright blue eyes opening with extreme determination. Meanwhile, back in Seoul, with only 10 minutes left until the grand opening of the server, a famous digital influencer begins her livestream showcasing the game console. Streamer Haebayul interacts with her audience of millions of followers, while the chat comments buzz with questions about the console. She explains to viewers that she preferred to buy the basic edition first for safety reasons, since many on the internet still say that the game is a scam. Haebayul puts the virtual reality headset on her face and smiles excitedly as she sees the screen of her own live stream floating right before her eyes. At that point, the internal digital clock on the display beeps, indicating that it has finally reached 10 o'clock at night, the server's opening time. The screen flashes with a message indicating that the connection is available, leaving the influencer and her chat completely abuzz with the possibility that it's real. Haebayul settles into her chair and initiates the connection, eager to discover if this is truly full virtual reality or just the biggest hoax of the year. She presses the confirmation button and begins the login process, her heart racing with anticipation. Suddenly, a colossal explosion of blue light envelops the girl's body in the armchair, startling her with the intensity of the sensation. Her eyes are scanned by a bright light, and she lets out a cry of astonishment as she feels her consciousness being transported. In the world of Arsalan, the tower's immense soul crystal cracks with extremely powerful blue lightning bolts as it processes the signal. One of their wizards joyfully announces that the first Earth hero has just arrived and orders the others to begin the magical reception process. The girl blinks slightly as she tries to clear her vision within that new spiritual space. She finds herself floating amidst a beautiful cosmic landscape filled with bright constellations, without knowing where she actually is. Upon seeing her live chat screen floating in space with her surprised followers, Haebayul screams hysterically, realizing she has actually entered a perfect virtual reality. She notices a floating character creation panel and decides to explore the available options to create her avatar. The panel displays the available races, such as humans, elves, dwarves, and orcs, for the player to choose from. Haebayul decides to choose the elf race, because she finds it the most beautiful and takes the opportunity to adjust her character's bust size with a mischievous smile. As soon as the creation is complete, the foot of his new avatar lightly touches the lush, soft green grass of Arsalan. Now transformed into a beautiful blonde elf, the girl jumps for joy, broadcasting everything live to her shocked followers. She walks through the forest and spots the first buildings of the village of Evert in the distance, trying to understand if that magnificent scenery is indeed Arsalan. The influencer exclaims with happiness, her hands covering her face, finding everything too perfect while the chat on her live stream goes wild with the images. While celebrating the successful connection, she notices a huge silhouette appearing right behind her, leaving her confused about where to go. Knight Leon gently points in the right direction and informs her that the initial village event is just ahead, causing the elf to turn around in surprise. Her eyes widen and she is completely breathless when she comes face to face with the stunning beauty of that warrior. Leon smiles charmingly under the blue sky and offers to accompany her if she doesn't know the way to the village. The knight introduces himself chivalrously as Leon, leaving the girl completely blushing with his charisma. Meanwhile, in the village of Evert, hundreds of players are already running and exploring the streets, climbing rooftops and excitedly testing the mechanics. The players shout excitedly, praising the genius of the Ozeong air and inviting each other to form groups and level up together. Some users with funny nicknames chat amongst themselves, laughing at inside jokes and references to other famous internet stories. Habiol arrives at the village and is impressed to see so many players interacting there, while the chat on her livestream comments that the place has a welcoming feeling of peace. She decides to look for information on where to go and resolves to approach one of the city guards to ask for help. The elf waves cheerfully to the soldier, who swallows hard, startled at the approach of a heroine from another world. The guard shivered beneath his helmet, remembering Jin Woo's instructions to follow the game's script naturally and without stuttering. He forces a robotic smile and greets the warrior, saying that the village always welcomes heroes and asks her to register his name. The girl smiles, making peace and love signs with her hands, realizing that this is the game's nickname selection screen, and chooses her nickname, Habiol. A system panel appears on the screen informing that, due to the character's excessively developed bust, her agility has been reduced, causing Habiol to happily celebrate finally having secured her name. Everything seems incredibly real to Habiol, who decides to ask directly if the guard is also a player, but he only responds with a pre-prepared welcoming phrase, making her realize that he is a robot from the game itself. She tries to interact a little more and asks if he has any missions available for her, while the guard thinks she's acting exactly like a true heroine in search of adventure. The guard points to a magnificent building just ahead, and suggests she go to the Adventurers Guild in that region to begin her journey. Meanwhile, Habiol's broadcast screen is flooded with messages from viewers completely obsessed with the handsome blonde knight who appeared earlier. Habiol comments to her audience that the boy distanced himself as soon as they crossed the village gates, reinforcing the idea that he was just another character controlled by the system. She continues walking through the village surrounded by other players, believing that she will soon receive some clue about the identity of that mysterious warrior when she starts the main missions. Floating high in the sky, Jin Woo observes the activity below and smiles with satisfaction, seeing that the human's reception to Leon's avatar has been incredibly positive. The young archmage decides to use his special mystical perception to examine whether the new player possesses any skills or talents that could be useful for his plans. He knows that all humans from Earth possess unique characteristics shaped directly by their soul's experiences, which can drastically accelerate their growth in the game. As Jin Woo scans the crowd of players, he notices that the vast majority of them possess only average, intermediate, or low-level skills. However, the Archmage's eyes suddenly widen as he notices something completely out of the ordinary among that group of rookies. He is shocked to see that Habiol possesses a top-rank skill called Social Evolution, which allows him to easily befriend even the wildest creatures. The young man quickly remembers that she has worked as an internet influencer for years, deducing that it was this routine that refined her soul with such a rare talent. Jin Woo realizes the absurd potential of this power, knowing that she will be the key to leading the purification of the entire territory by gaining the trust of the local creatures. Next, the scene shifts to the imposing Adventurers Guild, which gleams under the Arsalan sun. Habiol quietly opens the door to the reception area, curious to discover what the inside of the building is like. She enters the main hall and lets out a sigh of admiration at all the sophistication and luxury of that colossal reception. Suddenly, the girl is surprised by an excited voice that warmly greets her as a new heroine of the kingdom. The one who greets her with a radiant smile is the elf Tia, who theatrically introduces herself as the official receptionist of that guild. Habiol is completely mesmerized by the receptionist's stunning beauty, while the chat on her live stream explodes with comments of pure adoration for the new elf. Tia enthusiastically places an application form on the counter, encouraging the newcomer to fill in the information without worrying about her initial attributes. Completely charmed by the receptionist's charisma, the girl immediately agrees to sign the papers, while her onlookers continue to praise Tia's beauty. With a quill pen in hand, Habiol carefully signs the document to formalize his entry into the Adventurers Guild. Ant hands her a heavy bag of supplies and explains that inside are essential beginner items, as well as indicating the arsenal for choosing her first basic weapons. The girl happily thanks her aunt for the affection and receives a head pat, leaving the chat of her broadcast green with envy over such a sweet interaction. Still observing everything from high above the city with his floating staff, Jin Woo closely follows the progress of the recording. Through a mental connection, Tia comments to the game master that she found the young heroine adorable, and confesses that she feels a strong urge to torment her a little in the game. The elf giggles mischievously, imagining the players suffering and crying during the difficult missions, making Jin-woo wonder if everyone there is so sadistic, before warning that they have just attracted a true veteran warrior from another world. Ant is intrigued by the teacher's comment about the arrival of a veteran, at the same moment that a giant, muscular foot stomps forcefully on the lobby floor. A colossal, extremely muscular warrior with pink hair enters the place, complaining that the world is too boring and demands that high-quality food and drink be brought to him. Ant's expression is completely paralyzed and confused when she comes face-to-face with that bizarre and eye-catching figure in front of her counter. The elf panics completely and mentally warns Jin-woo that the place is being invaded by strange and unruly people, while the archmage just laughs and praises her good work. To make matters worse, other clueless players begin terrorizing the village, eating quest papers, rolling down stairs, and shamelessly chasing local citizens. The situation gets so out of control that one of the bizarre adventurers even earns a special achievement from the system for managing to completely disorient the receptionist, Tia, with his antics. Completely exhausted by the chaotic behavior of those humans, the poor elf collapses to her knees on the ground under a dramatic beam of light. Aunt clenches her fists in silent fury and vows to herself that one day she will see all these insolent heroes crying and begging for mercy. With a terrifying look and a sadistic smile on her face, she whispers that she will gladly sacrifice all their dignity in her future. Terrible missions. Meanwhile, back in the real world, newspapers around the globe begin reporting that FS Games' virtual reality game is incredibly realistic and that society is about to change completely. In light of the bombshell revelation, several influencers who previously criticized the project are now making public broadcasts, profusely apologizing for the false accusations they spread. The situation becomes so serious that governments in several countries begin broadcasting last-minute emergency programs to discuss the impact of this new technology on their societies. Political leaders and major global corporations realize that if they don't adapt quickly to this virtual revolution, they will be left behind once and for all. Just 1 week after the triumphant launch of Arsalan Saga, Lee Jin-woo arrives at the company office in the morning, greeting everyone warmly. One of the employees excitedly asks if the boss saw the huge line of advertising trucks and fans parked right in front of the company building. The young man smiles and confirms that the activity outside remains intense, while his colleague Young-moon approaches with a cup of coffee in his hands. Young-moon enthusiastically comments that the soulmate connection craze has swept the market and that they are constantly receiving business proposals, prompting Jin-woo to express his gratitude for the entire team's efforts. The developer then asks about the progress of the new virtual reality consoles, and the young president confirms that the next 50,000 devices will be released soon. Jin-woo knows that with the arrival of 50,000 new warriors at his disposal, he will finally be able to put his expansion plan into action to save the kingdom of Arsalan. He announces that the first major update in the game's history will begin soon, leaving the developers euphoric as they deduce that the legendary hero Leon will finally make his official debut. Young-moon implores the president to take a look at the keychain and collectible figurine project based on Leon, generating anxious cries from the entire art team. Far away in Arsalan, Jin-woo himself observes his reflection in the mirror, wearing Leon's heavy armor and wonders, somewhat apprehensively, if his heroic look really suits him. Looking closely in the mirror, Jin-woo is forced to admit that Leon's avatar turned out to be truly handsome and charming beyond measure. He begins to feel extremely embarrassed for admiring himself like that, when suddenly the elf Tyrus bursts through the door, making the boy yell in fright for her to knock before entering. Ignoring the complaint, the assistant enters the room imitating a dramatic voice and mocks the master's melancholy eyes, joking that the hero Leon must have a very tragic past. She performs an elegant pirouette in the middle of the room under the incredulous gaze of the archmage, who merely observes this exaggerated performance without knowing how to react. Tyrus moves even closer to the boy and with a penetrating gaze recites another poetic line about the sorrowful traveler who carries the weight of destiny on his shoulders. As romantic flowers bloom around the warrior, she sweetly asks if he would like to share his sorrows, causing Jin-woo to desperately beg her to stop the charade. Exhausted from all that theatrical charade, the archmage refocuses and asks if there are any good hunting grounds nearby where new players can level up and grow. Upon hearing from the elf that there is no safe territory available nearby, the young man sighs and decides that he will have to find some monsters on his own, directly from the corrupted areas. With firm and determined steps, the powerful Archmage walks towards the dark lands devastated by terrible erosion. He reappears amidst a desolate landscape filled with purple lightning, where the planet's corruption is concentrated in full force. Under the sinister glow of an immense blood moon that tinges the clouds red, the atmosphere exudes a heavy and frightening energy. Raising magical bluish barriers to protect himself from the poisonous mist that tries to consume him, Jinwoo advances without hesitation through that cursed territory. He remarks to himself that the gloomy place remains utterly repulsive while preparing his defensive spells. The Archmage raises his gleaming staff and sarcastically complains about the rudeness of his hosts, since no one came to greet him upon his arrival. With a mocking smile on his face, he decides to knock on the enemy's door, unleashing a massive blast of concentrated energy from his magic weapon. The attack explodes against the ground with devastating violence, carving a path through the darkness with flames of fire and golden lightning. Jinwoo watches with satisfaction the destruction caused by his high-level magic, which he comically named Bell. At that moment, a spiral of purple smoke begins to rise from the ruins, and a monstrous voice laughs loudly, saying that such a scandal was unnecessary to get its attention. The colossal lord of corruption emerges from the depths, revealing his countless red eyes and sharp teeth, and menacingly asks if the Archmage has finally returned to deliver his soul. As he faces the giant monster, Jinwoo sadly remembers the noble priests and paladins who were corrupted by that creature and transformed into mindless slaves. This terrible reality was the reason he fought completely alone for so long in a painful battle that, in the end, he lost. The monster taunts the Archmage, telling him to accept his tragic fate and questioning how much longer that fragile barrier will be able to keep him alive. Instead of being intimidated by the giant creature's threats, Jinwoo simply gives a slight, wry smile. The monster demands to know what he's laughing at, and the boy calmly replies that he was just thinking about how pathetic the great villain actually is. He points to the monster and explains that, despite its size, the villain is permanently chained to its own territory and cannot take a single step outside of it. The giant roars furiously at being called an insolent brat and questions whether the wizard came all this way just to mock him, but Jinwoo replies that he has no time to waste on nonsense. Ignoring the enemy's fury, the boy begins to look around, searching for something very specific amidst that dark fog. Looking down at the valley below and spotting the assembled army of monsters, the Archmage smiles, knowing he has found exactly what he was looking for. The system displays details of the fearsome level 10 corrupted goblins, creatures consumed by hatred, that attack any living being that crosses their path. The Lord of Corruption lets out a mocking laugh, stating that destroying those pests is useless, since any creature within his domain regenerates infinitely. Jinwoo agrees with the villain and comments that it would indeed be a problem if he were planning to fight them all alone. The young Archmage begins to channel his mystical energy onto the stone floor, activating colossal magic circles filled with shimmering runes. A massive storm of blue lightning falls from the sky over the Valley of Monsters, illuminating the entire apocalyptic scene with overwhelming force. With a simple snap of the boy's fingers, the highly complex spatial transfer spell is finally activated. The corrupted goblins begin to be enveloped by columns of bluish magical light that pull them directly towards the center of the circle. The mystical energy condenses into an immense explosion of light that distorts space itself and teleports the creatures out of there. The Lord of Corruption watches the scene perplexed, shouting in outrage at what kind of cheap space magic trick the wizard is trying to use. Waving casually, Jinwoo jokingly says he's just borrowing some of those monsters for his project and suggests the villain will repopulate the area soon. The Archmage sarcastically congratulates the monster, revealing that he has officially been cast as the mid-boss in the first main mission of his new game. But just before departing through his mystical portal, the boy suddenly stops midway, remembering a very important detail. He clenches his fist with a mischievous grin on his face and remarks that, since he borrowed the monster's creatures, it would be fair to give something in return as payment. The Lord of Corruption blinks his giant eyes, not understanding what the audacious human is planning to do. Jinwoo raises his hand and makes an obscene gesture right in the giant villain's face, ironically telling him to keep the change from that deal. The monster explodes in a blind rage and roars with all its might, ordering the immediate destruction of that audacious human. Dozens of dark tentacles lunge violently to crush him, but the Archmage vanishes in a flash of blue light in the last millisecond. Meanwhile, the scene abruptly changes to a beautiful and peaceful forest bathed in sunlight, where the players prepare to begin a new mission. The group, consisting of the muscular Namgung Somyun, the young Buldojang, and the elf Haibul, walks excitedly, commenting that the receptionist Tia promised that these goblins have a chance of taking down a super-rare sword. The young red-haired warrior straightens his posture and remarks that the creatures from the village should emerge from the forest at any moment. Suddenly, an extremely dense and sinister purple fog begins to creep across the forest floor, leaving all the players confused by the abrupt weather change. Haibul stares in fear at the sky that darkened in a matter of seconds, while her live stream screen is flooded with messages from viewers concerned about the frightening atmosphere. Suddenly, a creature with purple skin and a muscular build steps forward, breaking the forest branches with a terrifying noise. Several purple goblins with red eyes emerge from the shadows of the woods, wielding sharp blades and thirsting for blood. The three companions are completely shocked by the enormous size and bizarre coloring of those creatures, wondering if they have just encountered elite monsters. The goblin leader lets out a monstrous roar toward the group, revealing sharp teeth and an overwhelming fury. Namgung Somyun confidently draws his large sword, declaring that he will finish off that weak creature in just 3 simple blows. But, to the warrior's surprise, the monster leaps towards him with extremely dangerous agility. The boy can barely process the goblin's terrifying speed before the enemy blade reaches him. In the blink of an eye, the creature cuts through the air with a swift strike, grazing the adventurer before he can react. Namgung Somyun collapses unconscious on the cold forest floor, leaving Buldojang and Haibul completely terrified by such brutality. Furious at seeing his friend defeated so easily, Buldojang points his mystical staff and conjures a powerful fireball against the creatures. A massive blaze roars toward the goblins, engulfing the entire scene in a great explosion of flames. The young wizard smiles victoriously, believing he has eliminated his targets, unaware that the chat on his livestream is already mocking his false confidence. But in the next millisecond, a trail of dust and wind cuts through the smoke from the high-speed flames. The goblin reappears unscathed and delivers a violent blow that sends the wizard flying, while onlookers joke that he has just activated the monster's second phase. Haibul stands alone in the middle of the clearing with her trembling bow, while her audience begs her to flee before she is eliminated and blocked from the game. She stares into the creature's bloodthirsty eyes and realizes, in utter panic, that she doesn't stand a chance of winning this battle alone. One of the monsters leaps toward her to deliver the killing blow to the cornered young elf. With no way out, Haibul simply closes her eyes and lets out a scream of utter terror, bracing for the worst possible outcome. Suddenly, an extremely bright beam of golden light tears through the darkness of the forest with majestic force. The hero Leon leaps heroically through the air, striking the creature with absolute precision. With a single surgical stroke of his gleaming sword, the valiant knight cuts the corrupted goblin in half without any difficulty. Haibul slowly opens her eyes and is completely speechless when she sees the mysterious blonde warrior standing right in front of her. Leon slowly turns under the moonlight and greets her with a warm whisper, saying it's a great joy to see her again. With an extremely charming and welcoming look, he extends his hand and sweetly asks if the beautiful warrior ended up getting hurt in battle. Leon's structure is so impressive that it resembles the perfect workings of the meticulous gears of a world-famous luxury watch. Every part of its being was meticulously designed by master craftsmen from another world to function without any margin for error or failure, and the knight's physical body is surrounded by an absurd amount of magic and moldy circuits that react to Jinwoo's slightest movement. Tyrus implanted dozens of high-ranking spells into his armor and joints, ensuring that any touch from him would transmit pure restoration and divinity. Leon's avatar still possesses active special abilities that make him shine, inspiring admiration from others and provide instant healing to those in need nearby. Completely enveloped by that radiant aura, Haibul is left speechless with admiration and praises the warrior's dazzling beauty. She suddenly snaps out of her trance upon realizing she was acting foolishly in front of thousands of viewers on her live stream. Leon approaches, concerned by the elf's silence, and gently asks if she is truly all right or if she is in any pain. Haibul stammers with embarrassment, stating that she's fine, but the kind knight decides to use a healing spell on her as a precaution. He channels a gentle golden energy onto the girl, leaving viewers of his live stream amazed by the game's high-quality special effects. Haibul looks at her own hands in awe, feeling a comforting warmth and incredible strength flowing directly into her body. At that moment, one of the live stream viewers made a generous cash donation, praising the knight and declaring all his love for Leon. Thrilled with the amount received, Habyul does an extremely cute pink heart dance to thank her generous donor. Leon observes that energetic reaction and the floating little hearts with a look of complete confusion and disbelief. The knight sighs worriedly and dramatically remarks that the girl must have suffered a serious blow to the head to act that way. He reaches out to touch her and insists on healing her weakened mind, while Habyul desperately tries to push back, shouting that her mind is perfectly normal. To make matters worse, a new donation notification pops up on the screen, challenging the elf to do a funny bunny imitation in exchange for another cash reward. More bizarre challenges begin to fill the game screen, causing the girl to angrily yell that she wouldn't stoop to making a fool of herself for small amounts, while Leon watches everything thoughtfully. Observing the scene through his spiritual perception, the little archmage Jin Woo smirks and decides to have a little fun with the situation. Using his system administrator privileges, Jin Woo's spirit alters the chat notification and increases the challenge value to an absurd 5 million won, causing the elf to scream in shock at the amount. Habyul freezes completely in the middle of the forest, eyes wide, as her mind processes the unbelievable fortune before her. Instantly succumbing to the power of money, the girl puts her hands to her head, imitating bunny ears, and begins to jump in a docile and shy manner. She continues jumping from side to side, her cheeks flushed, trying to do the cutest imitation possible under the knight's perplexed gaze. Upon realizing the humiliation she had just endured, Habyul covers her face, crying with shame, and begs Leon not to judge her, while the knight reflects on how money has a terrifying power over people. Displaying his usual bright smile, Leon extends his hand and suggests taking her to a safe place in the village so she can rest her head, while she continues to grumble inconsolably. The clip of that embarrassing dance went viral across the internet, reaching hundreds of millions of views and being crowned the most hilarious scene of the year online. Habyul walks a little behind Leon, sighing with longing as she notices that even the knight's back is incredibly charming. She gazes at the young man's perfect profile under the moonlight, completely lost in her own thoughts. Leon slowly turns around with a reassuring smile and announces that they have finally arrived at their destination, asking her to tread carefully. The elf blushes intensely and thanks the boy for caring so much about her, while the chat on her stream continues to rattle off praise for the knight's protagonist-like demeanor. The blonde warrior assures them that the monsters won't be able to invade that safe area, leaving Habyul secretly saddened as she realizes their time together is coming to an end. She bows respectfully in gratitude for being saved and officially introduces herself as Habyul, to which the young man humbly replies that his name is Leon, a simple traveler. Leon explains that he travels through various regions to investigate the advance of the terrible erosion and reveals that he has found a large group of corrupted monsters dominating that area of the forest. He expresses concern that a dark conspiracy may be underway in the region, and confirms to the elf that the goblins took on that purple color precisely because they were consumed by corruption. As they converse, Leon's eyes gleam with a mysterious blue flame as he assesses the condition of his new adventure companion. The archmage reads the system notes about Habyul's incredible affinity and concludes that the girl, with her special ability, will surely become the mainstay of future player expeditions. Feigning weakness, the knight sadly remarks that his own strength as a lone warrior will not be enough to contain that threat. At that moment, a luminous panel from the system appears on Habyul's screen, offering an extremely difficult main subjugation mission sent directly by Leon himself. The elf is completely shocked and euphoric to realize that she has finally unlocked the long-awaited main questline of the game. However, she soon begins to doubt her abilities when she realizes she needs to gather 200 people, knowing that the other players are too busy collecting herbs or exploring the map individually. But, remembering that this was a direct request from her beloved knight, the girl clenches her fists, determined to do everything to fulfill the mission. With firmness and determination, she takes the hero's armored hand to accept the challenge. Looking him in the eyes, Habyul declares loudly that he will do his absolute best to gather the necessary army. Immediately after receiving Habyul's call through the game's networks, the Earth adventurers quickly begin to mobilize to help the cause. The knight Leon actively assists players in their daily hunts, saving various groups from attacks by wild beasts. He also makes a point of praising the adventurers for their efforts in gathering valuable resources, leaving a young herb gatherer beaming with happiness at the compliment. As a reward for everyone's hard work, Leon distributes generous bags filled with potions and essential support items for their journey. Some exotic-looking adventurers grab the supplies and ask if the warrior really won't need those precious items for himself. The knight displays a radiant smile and replies that there is nothing to worry about, for his true strength comes from his union with all those brave heroes. In a very short time, the game's online community forums are flooded with moving accounts from people whose lives have been transformed by Leon's inspiring actions. One user reports that the fact that the game's hero called her a warrior gave her real strength and courage to open her own bedroom door after years of isolation. She describes the profound emotion of reuniting with her mother and how much she regretted having been separated for so long from the person who loved her most in the real world. Now, motivated by the determination of Arsalan's virtual heroes, several players decide to turn the tables and fight tooth and nail to fulfill their role in that new world. Back in his modern office in Seoul, Jin-woo follows all the positive feedback on his computer and smiles with satisfaction, seeing that the subjugation group will fill up much faster than expected. Realizing the absolute success of his strategy, the young archmage decides that now is the ideal time to accelerate his plans to defend the kingdom. He reappears in his original wizard body and descends with firm, imposing steps the dark staircases of his gigantic mystical tower. Jin-woo opens the heavy, golden metal doors of one of the most important secret laboratories in the entire structure. He enters the enormous mystical hall illuminated by the bluish glow of a gigantic temporary core floating in the center of the room. The elf Tyrus awaits him patiently at the location, with several documents in hand, and greets him respectfully upon his arrival. Jin-woo inquires about the operation of the control device, and the assistant assures him that the magic tower is already perfectly interconnected to the system as an energy relay point. She explains that from there, they will be able to control all the mystical details of the territory, and the master confirms that he can already feel the energy of the erosion through the core. The archmage reflects that if the frequency with which goblins appear near the walls increases, the player's urgency to form an expedition will be even greater. He then orders his assistant to summon Generals Hollern and Hasmanka to the laboratory, when suddenly a mysterious voice behind him asks the reason for the urgent summons. Jin-woo slowly turns around with a rather enigmatic and subtle smile on his lips to answer the question. With a rather amusing and slightly frightening expression, he reveals that it's time for his loyal allies to transform into the terrifying goblins of the game. Generals Hollern and Hasmanka approach curiously, saying they are more than ready to help save Arsalan, but the impatient archmage tells them not to touch his face and to sit down immediately. The elderly clergyman settles into his armchair, asking how they can help, and Jin-woo says he will explain everything in detail as soon as the writer Tia is also present at the meeting. The boy glances to the side, calling out to the elf, and is startled to realize she is already standing beside him. Tia appears right in front of him with a completely somber and tired expression, as if she hasn't slept in days, making the young archmage let out a shrill scream of pure fright. Still trembling from the fright, Jin-woo angrily complains, asking if invading people's personal space has now become some ridiculous trend among the tower elves. Tia ignores the complaint and dramatically throws herself onto the sofa next to Tyrus, crossing her arms and wondering if any of Jin-woo's plans had gone wrong. She grumbles, her face buried in the pillow, finding it absurd that the master would ask if something went wrong after everything she went through at the hands of the adventurers. The writer hysterically complains about the guild creating ridiculous achievements, explaining that a clueless hero spent the entire day at the counter making unfunny jokes just to earn a silly mocker badge. Tia screams inconsolably that the adventurer wouldn't stop making a mess and stealing belongings from the reception area right in front of her, while Jin-woo tries to calm her down by telling her to take a deep breath. Jin-woo laughs at the situation and apologizes for the inconvenience, further irritating the elf who demands that he not waste the precious energy of the mana stones on the antics of those crazy humans. To divert attention from that noisy argument, the archmage quickly changes the subject and asks how the preparations with Generals Hollern and Hasmanka are going. The elderly cleric Hollern comments worriedly that the Earth heroes are already suspicious of his true divine identity, since he only tried to act in an ordinary way at the reception. He even considers whether it wouldn't be easier to simply eliminate all the busybodies, while Hasmanka fully agrees, saying that those adventurers are too meddlesome and think they know everything. The four castle attendants emanated a purple aura of deep depression and exhaustion, leaving young Jin-woo completely at a loss for how to console them. Tia questions why they were summoned there, prompting the archmage to ask why Tyrus didn't explain the plan beforehand, to which she replies, laughing, that she just wanted to see everyone's reaction up close. To change the subject, Jinwoo reaches into his robes and pulls out a modern video game controller to show the group. The elven writer asks, confused, what it is, and the boy explains that it's a mystical device to control the forest goblins from a distance. Tia reacts indignantly to the proposal of having to control such ugly and repulsive creatures, complaining that it would be a terrible humiliation to have to pretend to be a monster only to be defeated by the heroes. The Archmage insists on his strategy and explains that this sacrifice is necessary for Arsalan's safety, arguing that the heroes need to be defeated initially so they can unite much more quickly. Jinwoo points at the elf with determination and reminds her that Earthlings don't truly die because they are spirit visitors, encouraging her to use all her fighting strength without hesitation. Understanding the logic, Tia breaks into a wide, wicked grin and accepts the challenge to annihilate the adventurers, leaving the Archmage somewhat concerned by her excessive enthusiasm. Finding the controller's design quite curious, the elf asks the game master what the basic commands are for moving her new minion. The boy patiently explains that the gameplay has been completely simplified, teaching that the left directional pad is for walking and the right buttons perform combat actions. Jinwoo extends his hand and projects a large floating magic screen so she can view the initial test. A little hesitant, Tia presses the first few buttons on the remote to see what happens on the projection. On the magic screen, the purple goblin begins to run happily through the forest, surprising the elf with its immediate response to her commands. She has a lot of fun with the game and promises to provide all the necessary motivation for the heroes to join forces for the future battle of subjugation. Seeing Tia's excitement, the other assistants realize she's loving the mission, and she confesses that controlling someone in her own way is a wonderful feeling. Feeling envious of the fun, Hallern and Hasmanka ask to participate in the test, claiming they have plenty of free time and are experts in war tactics, receiving Jinwoo's permission. In no time, the whole group settles on the couch, happily playing and celebrating every maneuver and jump their monsters manage to perform on the map. The Archmage observes his most loyal subjects acting like children with the controls and can't help but find the scene quite comical. He makes a gesture with his fingers, imitating a camera, to capture that fun moment of bonding between his servants. Jinwoo takes a beautiful photo of the whole team playing and laughing together around the table in the secret laboratory. Back on Earth, the boy sets the image as the wallpaper on his personal smartphone, so he will always remember that special moment. Looking at his phone screen, the young Archmage gives a warm smile before putting the device in his pants pocket. He reflects that once the goblin leader is defeated, the first phase of the grand invasion of Arsalan's main story will finally be revealed to the players. Sitting at the dining table in his mansion, the young man plans to align this major gaming event with the launch of the second batch of sales for the immersive console. Suddenly, his grandfather slammed his spoon on the table, abruptly interrupting the whole family's dinner. The entire board of directors and relatives rose from the table simultaneously with extremely serious and determined expressions, leaving Jinwoo completely bewildered. The grandfather stares at his grandson in silence for a moment, his gaze filled with pure business seriousness. Next, the elderly man walks briskly out of the dining room, closely followed by the rest of the family. The boy holds the cutlery, confused by the sudden reaction, but the narrative soon returns to the bustling lands of Arsalan. In the game's village, several adventurers run through the streets shouting and summoning the strongest warriors to join the group in subduing the goblins. The entire guild is buzzing with excitement over the new recruitment announcements, while a poor player cries in despair after losing all his collected goods following his defeat by a monster. Jinwoo walks through the city center and is impressed by the unusual commotion of the crowd of players running in opposite directions. The young man sweated coldly behind his disguise, trying to understand what on earth had caused such commotion and despair throughout the city. In the nearby forest, a terrifying level 10 purple goblin leaps from the trees wielding a giant wooden club against the adventurers. The young wizard Buldojang attempts to counterattack by calling for support from his allies, while the purple creatures dodge the attacks with extreme agility. One of the warriors tries to contain the explosion of fire with his shield, screaming in terror as he realizes that even the goblins are conjuring high-level destructive spells. Another agile monster leaps unexpectedly from behind an adventurer, striking him precisely with its sharp spear. In the tower's laboratory, Tia laughs maniacally, clutching her video game controller and celebrating each perfect hit she lands on the poor players. The elven writer celebrates a combo of attacks by high-fiving Tyrus, under the suspicious gaze of Jinwoo, who finally discovers who is truly responsible for the carnage in the forest. Tia turns to greet the teacher with gigantic dark circles under her eyes and a totally exhausted face, as if she had spent the night playing video games. Jinwoo observes the four assistants emanating a purple haze of pure obsession with the controls, realizing with astonishment that the group has been playing non-stop for hours. The Archmage swallows hard, realizing that instead of training the Earthling heroes in a friendly manner, his team is actually torturing the poor souls of the players. Tia is overjoyed to defeat yet another unsuspecting hero in the forest, confirming Jinwoo's suspicions that she is enjoying the suffering of others. Suddenly, the Archmage realizes that the system has just updated the information and combat statistics of the elf's monster. The screen reveals that Tia's level 10 goblin has earned the fearsome title of Hero Killer after eliminating dozens of famous adventurers in the final hours of gameplay. Jinwoo is horrified to see the pile of bodies of defeated heroes in the forest and questions, horrified, the absurd number of players the elf has already eliminated single-handedly with her minion. The boy announces that it's time to begin the next and most important stage of the plan, and Tia agrees, excited to have almost forgotten the climax of that grand charade. In the forest under the daylight, the powerful purple goblin places his victorious foot upon the head of yet another defeated adventurer, who begins to dissipate into bluish magical dust. The powerful purple goblin keeps its foot firmly on the fallen hero's face, who lets out a low groan as his digital body begins to malfunction. With a victorious roar, the creature raises its colossal axe to the heavens, celebrating its absolute superiority on the battlefield. The other adventurers watch the scene in utter horror, shouting angrily at the violence and apparent lack of scruples of that mad goblin. In the secret laboratory, Tia laughs maniacally with her arms outstretched, mocking the weakness of the heroes who can do absolutely nothing against her lackey. Jinwoo watches the elf rider enjoying the suffering of others so much, and wonders, sweating profusely, where she learned to act so sadistically. However, the young Archmage soon smiles with satisfaction upon realizing that this display of strength will serve as an excellent incentive for the players to cooperate with each other. As he had expected, the results of that mass humiliation began to appear immediately throughout the village. News that a terrible monster is annihilating the novices spreads much faster than planned, causing an angry mob of adventurers to gather for revenge. Observing the warriors' determination as they prepared for battle, the knight Leon smiled, knowing that the real game was about to begin. With his imposing blue cloak flowing majestically in the wind, he walks with firm steps towards the main courtyard. Displaying a look filled with pure confidence and determination, the blonde hero calmly declares that the time has come to go into battle. Meanwhile, the robust warrior Ururugum is questioned by a colleague about his insistence on continuing to try and improve his equipment before the match. The big red-bearded man snaps his fingers and announces that he is more than ready, challenging the local blacksmith with an extremely confident smile. The dwarf blacksmith wields his enormous forging hammer firmly, daring the warrior to maintain that same arrogant pose after the process is complete. With a powerful cry, the master blacksmith brings his heavy hammer down directly onto Ururugum's metal shield. A massive wave of sparks and golden energy explodes around the forge altar upon impact. The entire area is engulfed in a large explosion of smoke and sparks, startling the customers waiting in the workshop. When the dust settles, the blacksmith reveals a grimace upon realizing that the shield has broken, leaving the adventurer in shock at seeing that his upgrade has failed. The warrior falls to his knees on the ground, his hands on his head, watching his hard-earned investment turn to trash, while the other customers laugh at his misfortune. Habiel approaches and asks in surprise if he's still insisting on these risky improvements even with the expedition about to depart, making the big guy beg for a comforting hug. The elf adjusts the strap of her bow with disdain and remarks that it's just an adrenaline addiction, reminding him that he almost lost everything the day before. Ururugum stands up crying with emotion and declares that a true player always needs greater challenges, even knowing that the chance of success is only 5%. The blacksmith laughs at the customer's madness and comments that he really doesn't know when to stop, jokingly adding that the warrior is too small for the size of his ambition. Determined to try one last time, the big guy bets all his remaining fortune on improving his wooden shield under Habiel's disbelieving gaze. It is then that the hero Leon calmly walks through the courtyard and calls out to the elf, causing her to turn around in surprise at his arrival. The knight praises Habiel's rapid growth in such a short time, while the other adventurers around begin to whisper, marveling at Leon's imposing presence. The girl asks what brings him there, and the hero explains that he decided to personally assess the city's situation before the group set out to subdue the goblins. He smiles sweetly, saying he would like to help in any way he can, making Habyul sigh with longing at the knight's immense kindness. Suddenly, Urarugom runs desperately towards Leon with a terrifying expression, making the elf scream in terror, thinking it's a robbery. The warrior kneels before the blonde knight, imploring his divine help, leaving Leon quite surprised by this dramatic approach. Habyul tries to remedy the situation by explaining that the big guy is their group's protector and that he's completely addicted to equipment upgrades. Leon questions what exactly he needs to do, and the warrior simply asks the knight to stand beside him as a good luck charm during the forging process. The blacksmith Tukun gives a thumbs up and announces that he is ready to begin another round under the hero's blessing. With a confident nod, Leon positions himself beside the forge altar to lend mystical support to the process. The blacksmith raises his metal hammer with all his might and delivers a resounding blow against the wooden shield. The impact generates an immense, brilliant discharge of energy onto the workshop anvil. To the astonishment of all present, a gigantic column of golden divine light exploded from the forged altar towards the sky. The system displays a message of absolute success, revealing that Urarugom's iron shield has reached the maximum level of enhancement. The warrior goes wild and starts jumping for joy around the workshop, shouting hysterically upon seeing that his shield has gained rare magical properties thanks to the lucky totem. He bows repeatedly in gratitude before Leon, while the humble knight tries to downplay it by saying he didn't do anything extraordinary. Urarugom begins to mock Habyul by showing off his shiny shield, deeply irritating the elf who can't stand her friend's childish provocation. To make matters worse, a new donation notification pops up on the live stream, challenging the girl to achieve the same level of weapon upgrade in exchange for 1,000,000 won. Overcome by greed, Habyul grabs Leon's arm and begs him to bless her attempt as well, receiving a gentle nod and wishes of good luck from the knight. The blacksmith prepares himself, and once again brings his heavy hammer down upon the girl's wooden bow. A new burst of golden light fills the workshop, and Habyul screams hysterically upon seeing that her weapon, too, has been successfully upgraded to the maximum level. The elf jumps for joy, celebrating her live stream prize, and declares all her love for Leon, while the other players begin to approach, drawn by this miracle. Within minutes, a gigantic crowd of adventurers surrounds the hero, wielding their swords and axes and begging for a blessing of luck. Leon flashes a radiant smile and casually remarks that the process isn't difficult at all, leaving poor blacksmith Tukun sweating and terrified by the crowd. The knight approaches the blacksmith and, with a rather mischievous look, whispers for him to prepare to work hard, making the dwarf silently plead for help in his mind. The entire workshop erupts in shouts and celebrations, with dozens of success messages popping up non-stop on the screen, while the exhausted blacksmith is forced to work like a madman to serve the endless line of customers under Leon's amused gaze. The poor blacksmith Tokun collapses onto a wooden bench, completely exhausted and gray, feeling that all his vital energy has been consumed by the adventurer's haste. Habyul marvels that Leon's lucky blessing really works, unaware that the archmage actually attributes the success to the blacksmith's incredible skill, which ultimately ruined the group's teamwork. Suddenly, the flamboyant bard Naman appears, leaping towards the pair, gleefully celebrating the successful upgrades to his companion's equipment. The bard with the feathered hat begins to strum his lute and offers to sing a celebratory song he himself composed for the occasion, leaving Habyul quite embarrassed. He starts yelling an extremely out-of-tune heavy metal song about debts and hammers, prompting the embarrassed Urarugom to explain that the bard ended up joining their group on their last mission by sheer bad luck. The warrior reveals that the only advantage of that deafening noise is that the singing is so horrible that even the fearsome goblins flee, covering their ears in pain. Watching the scene from afar, Jinwoo recalls that the elf Tia almost went mad from the singing due to her race's sensitive hearing, deducing that this was why the bard never heard his orders in the game. However, upon closer examination of the musician, the archmage realizes that the spiritual energy emanating from the player's soul gives him an extremely familiar feeling. Leon activates his soul perception and discovers that the bard is actually an old acquaintance from his life on Earth who dreamed of being a singer, revealing that his special ability is the B-rank Untamed Dream. Habyul asks if something is wrong when she sees the blonde knight massaging his temples with a tired expression, but he disguises it by saying everything is fine. Just ahead, the leaders of the two largest guilds in the game begin arguing heatedly in the courtyard to decide who will lead the expedition against the monsters. The warrior hunter mocks the arrogance of the Valhalla guild captain, comparing her to a hunting dog that runs ahead, which infuriates her with that insolent provocation. He proudly displays his achievements as a level 12 hunter guild master, disdainfully stating that he loves crushing anyone who doesn't shut up during crucial moments. The red-haired warrior gritted her teeth furiously as she saw the details of her rival's profile, vowing to knock every tooth out of his mouth if he continued talking like that. Leon calmly places himself between the two brawlers to calm things down, heroically suggesting that they save all that fighting fury for facing the goblins in the forest. While the guildmaster awkwardly apologizes to the knight, Leon watches him closely and senses that the presence of those two leaders is also quite familiar to him. By focusing his mystical perception on the two warriors, the young archmage is utterly shocked to recognize the features of his own grandfather and his beloved older sister. He tries to process the fact that his elderly grandfather is controlling that muscular and experienced warrior in the virtual world, while glancing away to assess his sister's posture. Jin-Woo fondly remembers the playful moments and casual conversations he used to have with his sweet sister in the kitchen of their old home in the modern world. The boy shivers coldly behind his armor as he watches his sweet sister transform into a barbaric warrior with a scar on her face, roaring hysterically and inciting men to slaughter. He wonders, perplexed, how the two managed to accumulate so many contribution points to found their own rival guilds in such a short time on the server. The Archmage ponders the accelerated pace of his family's evolution and wonders if his former parent company, the Oseong Group, is truly functioning correctly. His meditation is interrupted when the crowd of players in the courtyard finally notices the arrival of the hero Leon and begins to celebrate his presence. Hundreds of adventurers shouted euphorically, raising their weapons high, declaring that they had gathered there especially to answer Leon and Hebiul's call for a goblin hunt. The elf Hebiul approaches, visibly moved, and thanks everyone for accepting the invitation. A young warrior tells her that the group would never fail to help those who had saved them before. With his impeccable archmage memory, Leon surprises everyone by politely greeting each player by their username. He continues greeting the warriors and girls in the crowd by their registered names, leaving one of the adventurers completely flushed and breathless upon hearing the hero pronounce her nickname. The knight praises the admirable growth of everyone there and solemnly declares that fighting alongside such brave heroes will be the greatest honor of his entire existence. The crowd erupts in euphoric shouts and applause, accepting the request with raised fists and vowing to destroy the monsters that plague the forest. Satisfied with the determination of the Earth Warriors, Leon smiles confidently under the blue sky and orders the start of the great expedition. The valiant knight walks towards the castle gates, where the royal soldiers are already lined up to render military honors to the army. Captain Heine takes command with a firm shout of attention and orders all knights to stand at their positions of respect. She raises her gleaming sword and commands an official salute of honor to the 802 Earth heroes who make up the subjugation force. Under the command of the Warrior of Light and the brave warriors who accompany him, the immense march of adventurers finally crosses the gates of the village of Arsalan. With the thunderous greetings of the knights echoing off the walls, the immense army of players marches in an organized fashion towards the shadowy lands. The expedition advances, climbing the rocky mountains under a reddish sky that heralds their arrival in the dangerous forest, hampered by erosion. The big Ururugom walks cheerfully, leading the line, laughing and joking in a relaxed way with the other warriors in the group. Some players take advantage of the fantasy setting to talk about their real lives, offering drinks and celebrations before the first battle. The enthusiastic bard, Naaman, resumes writing his compositions in his notebook amidst the beautiful landscape, ignoring the warriors' complaints about his clumsy singing. The group walks along lightly and cheerfully, viewing the event merely as a fun video game mission, oblivious to the true tension of Arsalan's real world. Leon observes their enthusiasm and reflects that this relaxed atmosphere is excellent, knowing that forcing people to fight without enjoyment would turn them into mere slaves of war. Through the tower's mystical connection, Tyrus reports to the Master that the support tests have been completed and that the strength of the enemy creatures has also been amplified as planned for the event. The elf projects an image of the tower's inhabitants celebrating and playing video games at a secret base, revealing that the generals have already left for their own battle preparations. The knight agrees, satisfied with the plan's progress, and believes that the elf Tia's monsters will soon make their first contact with the players. Tyrus types the final commands into her mystical terminal and announces the start of the 5th round of the Goblin Subjugation event. Deep in the dark forest, the adventurers begin to halt hesitantly as they notice a thick fog approaching. The warriors complain in fear that the fog has suddenly become too thick to see the path, praising the game's chilling realism and atmosphere. Leon warns everyone that the energy of erosion is affecting the magical properties of that forest, leaving Habuel quite intrigued by the knight's comment. He warns them seriously that the monsters are already aware of their presence and that an evil spiritual force is interfering with the environment while a huge purple silhouette emerges from the shadows. Leon yells for everyone to retreat immediately as a monstrous, purple tentacle leaps from the mist toward the hero's expedition. With a swift movement of his sword, Leon blocks the violent impact of the purple tentacle that was trying to strike him by surprise. The blonde hero roars at the adventurers, ordering an immediate retreat, as it's a direct erosion trap, leaving Habuel and the others in utter shock. Several dark branches begin to sprout from the ground around them, causing the players to scream in terror, thinking they are in the middle of some sacrificial ritual. Several adventurers attempt to escape the forest, but realize, in despair, that the way back has been completely blocked by enemy barriers. Habuel recoils in terror as she sees the purple claws of corruption about to capture her in the middle of the dark clearing. The colossal tentacles descend with full force to crush the warriors trapped in the middle of the swamp. But the hero Leon leaps forward, unleashing an extremely powerful slash of golden light that cuts through the darkness of the forest. With a furious war cry, he unleashes a devastating sword strike that purifies and precisely cuts away the corrupted branches. A massive explosion of golden mystical energy and lightning instantly purifies the area, freeing the adventurers from that threat. Still panting from the physical exertion, Leon turns around worriedly, asking if everyone is all right, while the red-haired barbarian warrior calls his attention. The captain points to the sky with a tense expression and warns that something extremely unusual is happening with the clouds and the sunlight. To the astonishment of the entire army, the orange sky above the mountain is swallowed by a complete solar eclipse enveloped in a terrifying purple haze. The players stare at the black sun, unable to believe the realistic scale of that dark event, which seems to indicate the arrival of the boss. In the midst of the eclipse's darkness, the heavy sound of a goblin's war drums begins to echo loudly through the rocky mountain. From the surrounding hills, hundreds of fearsome purple goblins with glowing eyes emerge in silhouette, unleashing monstrous roars against the army. The enemy army takes control of the entire valley under the black sun, completely surrounding the hero's expedition and giving them no chance of escape. Seeing the colossal scale of that horde, the players begin to sweat and realize they have entered a true dark war against the monsters. Leon adjusts his fighting stance and concludes seriously that they have fallen into a great ambush prepared by the creatures of darkness. The red-haired warrior bites her lip in irritation and deduces that, for an army of that size to be waiting for them there must be some traitor in the village leaking information. Suddenly, one of the enemy commanders leaps from the top of the rocks, landing heavily in the center of the battlefield. The fearsome goblin leader points his weapon defiantly, while the elf Tia in the laboratory laughs evilly, controlling the monster's every move. Seeing the horde of opponents and the threat of an ancient dragon approaching, some desperate adventurers begin to think that the expedition is completely lost. Leon takes the blame for the mission's failure and declares that Earth's heroes are not yet ready to face that evil alone. He decides to channel his mystical energy to conjure an emergency teleportation spell and send all the players back to the starting village. Magical blue circles begin to form beneath the feet of each of the adventurers present on the battlefield. The system displays a warning stating that the knight is using all his strength to save them, but warns that refusing help and dying on the spot will bring severe penalties to the player. The players react with dismay, shouting and asking what will happen to Leon if he decides to stay alone to hold off the enemy army. The blonde knight merely gives them a discreet and comforting farewell smile, causing Habuel to begin crying with emotion at his sacrifice. The elf shouts determinedly, refusing to leave and abandon Leon in that battle, stating that she will fight alongside her beloved knight to the end, even if she is eliminated from the game. Inspired by the girl's courage, the red-haired captain raises her giant axe and declares that the warriors of her guild never retreat before mere enemies, ordering everyone to stay and fight. The master of the Hunters Guild also assumes his attack stance with his bow, encouraging his men to hunt those goblins to secure the evening's feast, Bard Naman plays his heavy metal music again in honor of the group's bravery, while all the adventurers celebrate their decision to stay for the battle. Leon observes the unwavering determination of the Earth heroes with surprise and asks seriously if they are truly aware that this fight will be terrible. Habiel raises his clenched fist with a look full of pure confidence and shouts with all his soul that they are more than ready for combat. Moved by the group's loyalty, the knight thanks them all and promises that, as long as they refuse to give up, his sword and his soul will be with them until the end. He raises his sword to the heavens under the eclipse and unleashes a colossal wave of holy light that envelops the entire army of adventurers. The players feel an incredible energy coursing through their veins and celebrate in amazement upon realizing they have received a powerful status blessing from Leon. The blonde warrior points his gleaming sword directly at the enemy horde, leading the final charge. The entire army of 800 adventurers rushes forward through the valley, their war cries deafening as they fight for the fate of Arsalan. Jinwoo watches the warriors advance resolutely against the horde and thinks to himself that the true war for the salvation of the kingdom has finally begun. Meanwhile, in the tower's mystical laboratory, Tyrus comments worriedly that if the heroes decide to flee now, the risk of them being corrupted by erosion is extremely high. Ant laughs confidently, fiddling with her video game controller, assuring them that the system will prevent any escape attempt since the main story demands that final battle. Tyrus praises the elven writer's intelligence and thinks with satisfaction that Master Jinwoo was absolutely right to trust in the courage of those warriors from the other world. The eyed assistant smiles as she sees the players' determination as they fight with all their might on the screens, realizing that those earthlings truly consider Arsalan their second homeland. She observes the beautiful elf with a look full of admiration and affection for all her dedication. Ant bites her lip with a maniacal grin and furiously types into her video game controller, vowing to do her best to defeat the adventurers and their forest monsters. The powerful, gleaming-eyed goblin leader leads the enemy charge, rushing swiftly toward the adventurers' defensive line. At the front line of the players, the hulking Ururugom takes the lead and orders all the shield warriors to advance and contain the onslaught. He lunges his robust body forward and executes a devastating shield charge against the corrupted goblins leading the horde. The big guy violently clashes with the monsters using his special ability and laughs loudly as he watches the goblins fly away thanks to the incredible strength of his enhanced shield. The violent impact of Ururugom's charge throws several goblins into the air, opening a large gap in the enemy's defensive line. One of the monsters leaps furiously towards the wooden shield of one of the adventurers, trying to break through his guard at all costs. The frontline warriors shout to maintain formation as they attempt to block the barrage of violent attacks from the creatures. A bald-headed adventurer groans in pain as he absorbs the heavy impact of an enemy club against his red shield. The red-haired captain of Valhalla tries to hold back the monster's onslaught, shouting determinedly to motivate her companions to resist the attack. The hulking Ururugom yells for his colleague to advance swiftly behind the goblins to break their defensive formation. With his shield raised to absorb the impacts, the robust warrior advances, trampling the creatures that tried to block his path. He leaps toward the enemy leader with a mighty shout, delivering a devastating blow with his iron shield. The young barbarian brings her giant axe down with all its might, directly against the horde of corrupted goblins. The brutal impact of the blow generates a colossal shockwave filled with electricity that sweeps away dozens of enemies at once. Goblins struck by the wave of energy scream in terror as they are instantly reduced to magical dust. The high-rank attack generates a massive golden tornado in the middle of the battlefield, decimating a large portion of the enemy line. Several creatures fall lifeless to the mountain floor under the effects of the golden rays that continue to sparkle across the ground. Leon observes the warrior's courage closely and vows to protect the life of each of those heroes until the end of the battle. Seeing Leon's heroic example, the redhead urges the warriors of her guild to go all out in destroying the monsters. The entire group of adventurers roars in unison and charges forward across the desert, swords and axes in hand. The barbarian spins her heavy axe with a confident smile, ready to decapitate yet another opponent. She easily cuts an agile goblin in half, advancing relentlessly through the dust of battle. Yet another creature is struck squarely by the deadly blow of the red-haired warrior of Valhalla. With sheer combat brutality, she delivers a violent headbutt to the face of a goblin that was trying to restrain her. The stunned monster falls to the ground, screaming in pain under the firm feet of the barbarian who advances determinedly. Suddenly, another stealthy goblin emerges from behind the warrior. his weapon raised and ready to strike her. But the master of the Hunters Guild fires a precise arrow that strikes the attacking goblin in the head before it can strike. The creature's lifeless body collapses onto the sand, and the barbarian continues running without even needing to look back. The experienced hunter smiles, praising the good hunt, receiving a nod of thanks from the proud leader of the Valhalla Guild. In the rear, Yahello takes command and orders all ranged attack units to prepare to fire on the horde. The elf pulls back the string of her bow and leads the attack, unleashing a rain of shimmering arrows at the enemies. Viewers of her live stream begin to mock her exaggerated shooting pose on the game screen, causing the girl to mentally scream in embarrassment at the jokes in the chat. The guild's mages begin casting their fireball and magic missile spells simultaneously against the goblins. The spells explode violently in the middle of the horde, spreading fire and destruction across the entire enemy line. One of the mages complains, exhausted, that the number of opponents is too great and fears that his mystical energy will run out before the end of the battle. The bard Naman observes the bravery of his companions, fighting with all their might amidst the smoke, and feels extremely inspired by the moment. He decides to play his most powerful battle hymn to support his allies, channeling a brilliant aura of red and blue energy through his lute. The magical musical notes begin to circulate around the wizards, leaving them extremely surprised by that invigorating sensation. The boy realizes that the bard's music is rapidly restoring the stamina and mana of the entire group through that bizarre heavy metal melody. Naman excitedly shouts to his companions to use his mystical melody as a source of power, promising to continue playing as long as they need strength to fight. With their magical energy fully restored by the music, the adventurers charge forward with renewed fury against the corrupted goblins. Yahello fires another confident, well-aimed arrow, sensing that the expedition is progressing perfectly and pushing the horde back. She reflects excitedly that, despite the absurd number of enemies, the subjugation group has a real chance of achieving victory if they continue at that pace. Suddenly, a huge and violent explosion of dust and wind hits the center of the battlefield, knocking down several adventurers. The warriors fall, stunned, staring at the sky in terror, trying to understand what that immense silhouette was that had just plummeted from the heights of the eclipse. Revealing his dark armor and fearsome red cape, the hero-killer emerges from the dust with a murderous gaze. With a violent strike of his weapon against the ground, the villain unleashes an immense blast of purple energy that shatters the ground with a thunderous force. The overwhelming attack instantly eliminates dozens of adventurers, hurling their lifeless bodies far away. To everyone's horror, the bodies of the defeated goblins begin to writhe bizarrely among the rocks. The slain creatures begin to rise from the ground, enveloped in an evil aura, revealing that they have been resurrected as undead servants. The players are thrown into utter despair when they realize that the number of survivors from the expedition has plummeted drastically to just over 600 warriors. The fearsome chieftain continues his relentless slaughter through the forest, rapidly reducing the army of heroes to just 500 survivors. Leon surges forward at high speed and blocks the monster's weapon with his gleaming sword, declaring that it will be his true opponent from then on. The hero-killer roars furiously at the interference and prepares his most powerful blow to clash against the blonde knight's blade. Leon slams his blade with full force against the hero-killer's heavy weapon, generating a violent shower of sparks. The two exchange quick and electrifying blows amidst the dust of battle, making the ground tremble with the intensity of the confrontation. With a perfect spinning motion of his golden sword, the blonde knight slices through the fearsome goblin chieftain once and for all. The surviving heroes erupt in celebrations and euphoric shouts, unable to believe that Leon actually defeated the terrifying monster. But suddenly, dark claws of purple energy emerge, tearing through the ground right in the center of the battlefield. The tentacles of corruption pierce the defeated goblin's body, injecting a dark mist and resurrecting him in a macabre way. The creature rises, enveloped in intense purple smoke, leaving Yahello and the other warriors completely stunned by the terrifying scene. The resurrected monster grins macabrely from ear to ear, exuding an even more destructive power than before. He lets out a deafening roar, raising his battle spear, ready to begin a new massacre against the adventurers. Feeling the creature's overwhelming pressure, the elf panicked and asked what was happening while Leon gritted his teeth in worry. The knight points to a gigantic black column that has appeared in the distance, explaining that this pillar of mana is summoning and resurrecting goblins endlessly. He reveals that the only way to stop the army's advance is by destroying the mystical core hidden right in the center of that structure. Yahello and the guild leaders regain their resolve and vow to forcefully destroy the core Once and for all. Leon gives a discreet smile and approves of his companion's courage with a slight nod. Under the command of the blonde hero, the adventurers race determinedly towards the gigantic black column of energy. The army of undead goblins advances, laughing shrilly to block the hero's path. Leon leaps forward, unleashing a sword strike charged with golden lightning that cuts a path through the horde. He brings his mystical blade down with full force against the ground, generating an immense, purifying shockwave. The golden rays cut through the branches of corruption and disintegrate the creatures that tried to surround them from the flank. With the path temporarily clear, the knight orders the warriors to rush towards the core while he holds the rear. A purple goblin leaps unexpectedly at the elf Habiul, who hurriedly tries to draw her bow to defend herself. Leon appears in the blink of an eye and blocks the enemy attack, saving the girl, who lets out a scream of fright at the speed of the impact. The blonde hero grits his teeth as he withstands the creature's brute force, while his armor begins to spark with the excess of mystical energy consumed. With a swift movement, he throws his opponent backward and shouts for his teammates to keep running without looking back. Exhausted from the continuous combat, Leon falls to his knees on the ground, leaving Habiul completely distraught at seeing the hero's exhaustion. He looks at her with a serious, determined gaze and firmly orders her to keep moving forward to complete the mission. The master of the Hunters Guild takes the lead, shouting for the warriors to stay focused and keep running, while the number of survivors of the expedition plummets to less than 200 heroes. With no mystical energy to cast their defensive spells, the surviving mages decide to use their last strength in a suicidal attack to clear a path. They conjure a gigantic, self-destructive magical explosion that wipes out dozens of goblins, drastically reducing the army of heroes to just 42 survivors. Habiul continues running desperately up the hill toward the black pillar, even though her legs feel weak from exhaustion. A new and immense horde of monsters emerges, blocking the final access to the temple, making it clear that the pillar continues to produce defenses. The two guild masters overtake the elf at high speed, promising to create the opening she needs to deliver the final blow. The bard Naman appears, playing his most powerful melody to grant a final and massive mystical status bonus to the young archer. With her energy fully restored, Habiul raises her gleaming bow and conjures her ultimate spiritual arrow rain skill. A veritable storm of green energy arrows falls from the sky, instantly annihilating the entire horde blocking the path. Completely too weak to continue standing, the elf collapses to her knees on the ground, making a victory sign and imploring her companions to destroy the core. Several undead monsters leap towards the defenseless archer, forcing the last two warriors to race against time. The red-haired barbarian warrior ignores the cuts on her body and charges forward at high speed, axe in hand. The hunter roars, declaring that the sacrifice of his companions will not be in vain, and leaps alongside the barbarian towards the bright red crystal. They project their bodies into the air with absolute precision, aiming at the center of the temple structure. With a thunderous war cry, the two surviving warriors bring their weapons down with full force against the crystal. The axe and daggers collide simultaneously against the mystical core of Arsalan, generating a violent shockwave. The red crystal shatters completely under the brutal impact of that coordinated, high-powered blow. The core explodes spectacularly into chunks of purple energy, causing the hunter to celebrate with relief at having managed to destroy the magical source. The red-haired barbarian sighs, believing the battle is finally over, when suddenly a mystical green portal opens before them and a dark voice mocks her words. The two warriors were immediately in a state of utter shock as they felt that overwhelming presence emerge from the shadows of the temple. Revealing his sinister bone armor and glowing red eyes, the fearsome skeleton necromancer coldly warns that none of them will leave that place alive.